Ugh. I just realized how messy my background is. This is an impromptu live, as you might be able to tell. Give me one second. You can watch me tidy up a little bit. That's better, yeah. That's what I get for using my bed as a backdrop. Also, I haven't eaten today, so I'm probably going to munch on some nuts. But anyway, welcome. IFAT is here. Why am I not surprised? Even with late notice, you still managed to show up. All right. Anyway, so as the title says, we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into the front vowels. I'm also going to reintroduce the house framework in a little bit of an updated way of looking at it. And yeah, I do have a class coming up in pretty much exactly 3 hours. Again, I don't like to go straight from live stream to a class, so I'm going to try to keep this one shorter, maybe around 2 hours. I know it's hard to do, but have you listened to the new Olivia? No, I haven't. I don't particularly follow her. Not for any reason. I like the couple big hits that I've heard, but I just never really looked into her. I'm sure I would like more of her music. Is it good? Maybe wait for some people to get in here while I munch on some nuts. Tastes so good. Let's see. Well, it's good. Pecans and walnuts mixed with peanuts for filling, but I didn't even buy them. I can't afford pecans and walnuts. My brother bought them for me. Also, did you know the two most anti-cancer nuts are pecans and walnuts? Now you know. Peanuts are actually pretty good for it too. Anyway, it was a great start to the live stream. Maybe I'll clip this part out. But let me bring some stuff up here. I don't know why I closed this. I just had it open in my other class. Let me share my screen so you're not so bored just looking at me. Oops, there's no one. And don't talk and eat at the same time. Do as I say, not as I do. If you eat too much of anything, you can die. If you eat too much broccoli, like I forget the exact number, but it's like if you were to eat like 40 pounds of broccoli, which is almost physically impossible to do because they're very filling, but like you would literally die. So yeah, even water. Like if you were to just keep drinking as much water as you possibly, like people have literally died from like water drinking contests where you just like drown out the electrolyte balance and your brain can't like fire its electrical signals right anymore and you just die. So yeah. Everything is deadly. Anyway, okay, so here's our map thingy. I guess we'll just sort of jump into this. I need my chat. Give me my chat. Pop out chat. Thank you. I love how you're like pretty much the only one here. That's cool. We're vibing. Vibing. Oh yeah, this thing's stupid. Ugh. So this is, I can't do it. That's unfortunate. Okay. That's okay. I could just do this. I'll just do it manually. No, because I need my tools on the sidebar. Why? Can I shrink you? Okay, I can shrink you. Good. This is Pinta instead of Paint because I started having this problem with the Paint program where, like I draw a lot and then I have to like Control Z to clean it up, and it would be like it used to have like where I could like go back like 20 times, and now it's like sometimes only 3 or 4. And I'm like, this program's not working. So I switched to this one, which has its own little issues, but at least it works. I feel like he's stupid. Okay, so yeah, feel free to ask questions about stuff, whatever, in the chat. I'm just going to start talking about the thing that is in the title. First, because it will be directly relevant and useful to have this in mind, I'm going to sort of revisit the house framework, like I mentioned a minute ago. I'm going to go here. My files are super organized. Okay, so now this is maybe a little messy, a little not perfect. Oh my god. But this right, because this is on the right side, this should be on the right side, but I was already drawing this and I already put the numbers here and I didn't want to mix it or like, redo it, especially since I was like in the middle of the class when I was doing it. So just pretend that the 7 and the 8 are on the right side, then it'll match. Don't be confused by that. But what I realized, right? So earlier on in the course, I developed this concept called the house framework, and there's, a file that was linked that people reference and this and that or whatever. And, it's not wrong. It's not necessarily like outdated or anything. I kind of stopped referencing it because the way that the course sort of evolved and I was approaching things, it didn't become as like directly useful or relevant. So it kind of like fell out of favor as a perspective. Again, not that it was wrong or anything changed. But because I think in the last live stream I was talking about like going from the ground up. And maybe I talked about this last time. I don't think I had this last time. I think this was like the day after the live stream where I realized this. So you have like your valve and breath. I add the breath there because it's easy to forget, but it's basically the valve. So it'd be that middle throat, the 9, bringing that 9 line down here, opening it up, everything gets wide. Now you have much more space. Don't mess too much with the top of the throat there. That's literally the foundation of the house, right? When I first came up with the house framework, I didn't even know that this was here. I didn't really know that like if we just attack the middle, that usually takes care of the throat problems and this whole like 9 line shifting. I didn't even really have that concept when I developed the house framework. So this takes, I didn't have the 11. This takes into consideration like all the current like understanding and approaches that I'm taking in the course and sort of revitalizes and reintroduces that that concept. Where's my chat? Where's my chat over there? Oh yeah, duh, because I put this on top. And so this is useful to some people. If it's confusing, then you can just ignore it. But you have your valve as the foundation of the house. So that's like literally the cement flooring, whatever, like underneath the house itself. If you don't have that, your valve's out of place. You're going to get tension up. You're going to be pushing things up. It's going to be, even if the rest of your posture is trying to do the right thing, you're going to be fighting yourself. So we got to make sure that your foundation is good. Now, the unfortunate thing is like, okay, if you're trying to get your valve, but your 11, your root of your tongue is pushing that way because that's what your posture does, that can affect your valve. I'm sorry, they're all kind of connected directly and indirectly in various ways. And so we have to get everything working together, but it's hard to do that at first. So we try to just go piece by piece, work on things slowly and, integrate them as we go. But that is your foundation conceptually. And as I probably said last time, now like it's a diagnostic tool. When I'm checking for problems, when I'm listening for problems, I always start from the bottom up. Like there's no point starting up here in your 1 and your 2. Again, these numbers are not in order. They're just the order that I found them or what I decided to label them as. So you don't have to start in the 1. No, you want to start at the bottom because if your valve is off and your 11 is off and your 3 is off, that's going to be pushing into the shape you're trying to make. And then, okay. So we start from the bottom first. And I encourage you, if you're learning by yourself, to take that approach. as you're trying to find and fix problems with your pronunciation. Okay. I've talked about what exactly the details of all these things are in previous videos, previous live streams, especially the most recent, say like 3 or 4 live streams. So you can go there if you want more information on all this and you're like, what are all these pieces? Okay. The 3 and the 11 is like the first floor of the house. Now you can look at this as the first floor of the house, or you can look at this as like the glue that is sort of like between the house and the foundation in a way. I actually think the 6 provides more of that role. We're going to revisit the 6 here. It's not actually on the house map. There's different ways to look at it. What I think makes most sense to me and what's most useful to me, and that has been useful to the students I've introduced this to more recently, is to think of the 3 and the 11 as sort of the first floor. But again, whatever works for you, it doesn't matter. It's different ways of conceptualizing things. Is the conceptualization is a tool. It's not an objective statement of whatever. It's a tool of how we're trying to think of these things and understand how they work together, right? Okay, so the 3 and the 11, they are indirectly connected. What one does, the other wants to do, but just because you do one doesn't mean the other will happen, of course. It's never guaranteed. But if your 3 is pushing up, your 11 would want to push up. This just looks like an arrow. I forgot to put the 11 there. This is the 11 here in the root. It's not all of this. It's just the root of the tongue here. If your 3 is pushing down, or sorry, it's lower, it's not being held up like it might be in your posture, that's going to encourage the 11 to kind of relax and come down and back as well, and vice versa. So we want to sort of keep an eye on those together, almost as like a unit in a way. Again, they don't always resist the same way. They don't always resist at the same time. It depends on what the sound is doing, what the sound is demanding of the posture, and how it has to sort of resist itself or stabilize itself. I mean, resist against the sounds. So it's not always like, oh, I go here in my 11, I go down in my 3. A lot of the times that'll be the case, especially for those higher sounds, but the 11 is more complex than the 3. So they do affect each other. They are kind of tied together. I think that they work sort of as sort of this whole first floor semi-unit type thing. Getting that will also maybe help any little lingering issues with the valve. Again, if we just start an as a base reference. But you can sort of like revisit the valve as like you're trying to get your 3 and your 11, make sure that you're not breaking anything, because pushing down your 3, you might push into the top of your throat here on accident, which then will, give you a weird voice, or, bring in tension through your valve, or weird things can happen. So that's, again, we're going to come back to the 6's role in keeping all that straightened out. But if you think your valve is okay, but it's not perfect, you go to your 3 and your 11, and you're like, okay, well, my 3 and my 11, I think, are better. They weren't working, but now they're better. Maybe your valve is fixed now, or maybe you can revisit it, keeping that in mind, and then try to like improve it more while getting them all working together. And then bam, you have a nice, good foundation plus first floor. This is sort of just a quick, dirty overview. Okay. Right. Real life, real practice is maybe going to be a little more messy, but that's the order that you kind of want to approach it. Then we have our 1, 2, and 5 up here. Again, the 3 is shorthand for 3, 4, because if you do your 3, your 4 is probably going to be right. Just don't pinch on the sides. 1 and 2 mirror the 3 and the 4. Up here, we get that nice, good sort of middle shape in the middle of the tongue that we've talked about many times in this course. The 5, of course, we're going to dig in with that center of gravity, make sure the tongue is low and back. We have directional tension going down and back, no pinching, relax nice and wide. Everything gets relaxed nice and wide, of course. And then stabilizes. And so that's sort of your second floor of your house. Okay. And the 1, 2, and 5, these are, especially the 1 and the 2, these are the pieces that are the easiest to start feeling. They're the easiest to start manipulating. They're the easiest to sort of work with overall. There's a learning curve, especially with digging in that center of gravity and stuff. And it's not necessarily easy, but it's relatively to the other ones, like it's kind of a little bit easier to start working with and feeling than the other things. And because of that, it provides sort of an easier access point in some way. And that's part of the reason why in earlier versions of the course, I was approaching it from the top down, because it's like, well, we can start getting those small wins. Um, and it's not like we just like do this and do this while completely ignoring this as we like learn things. No, every new sound that we learn in the course, like if you take classes with me or whatever, if you're following along in the rough order of the course at home, then like say we learn the E, okay, we're going to start down here, try to make sure the valve is, roughly the same as again, your 11 might be working wrong, throw that valve off. You say, okay, whatever. It's, maybe not, it's not in my posture setting, but it's being disrupted by other pieces. So you kind of say, okay, it's good enough for now. You go to your 3 in your E, you go to your 11 in your E, you learn, what those are supposed to do. You practice doing those. Maybe your valve is a little bit better now. Then you come up here and you say, okay, let me resist my 1 and 2, make sure my 5 is there, try to stack it all together and get it all working. So every single sound that we learn, every transition that we do, it's going to be from the bottom up. Makes it much more orderly. You get to solve problems that might be underneath other problems. Like maybe your 1 and 2 is an issue, but that's because your 3 is pushing up, et cetera, et cetera. So the sounds, of course, live on the second floor because all the sounds are up here in the mouth, right? And they're having a party, right? They're always dancing around, having a party, doing their thing, right? Having lots of fun. And so the 1 and 2, of course, is going to be doing its thing, but they're going to be jumping, you know, jumping on the floor, right? Pushing into that floor, doing all kinds of crazy things. And so again, whether you want to look at it as the first floor or you want to look at it as the glue between the house and the foundation, that 3 and that 11 needs to be working correctly in order to both support the sounds and also stabilize the posture, right? The other thing, which maybe I mentioned this last time, but I really realized that this layer here, this 3 and 11 layer, it has a dual purpose, especially the 11 more than the 3, but the 3 also. It's not; these aren't just for stabilization of the posture against what the sound is doing. They also help with the articulation of the sounds. Because remember, a lot of languages, they're going to take. Oh yeah, that is going to be a little bit of a problem, isn't it? Okay, so that should be fine. Okay, so they're going to take. No, it's not because I need that. Oh my god. Oh wait, hold on. I made this smaller. Yeah, there we go. That makes more sense. Make the bigger one smaller, not the smaller one smaller. Anyway, so right, you're in a lot of languages, the 11 is already tense this way, the valve is up like that. Okay, it's pinched. Your 3 is held higher, and then it depends on the language, whatever. There's going to be variation in the exact degrees of these things, but usually when you don't go for like a higher sound, you're probably maybe going to push up more in the 3 to give it support, push up more in the 11 to give it some support, depending on where the sound is. And those help you articulate the sounds in terms of like lifting into those positions to some degree. Plus, the jaw tends to be closed, more closed in a lot of other languages as well. That gives you less space. Blah 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 blah. Okay, so it all kind of like supports the articulation that way. Where we have this much lower posture, we're starting lower. Everything's down, everything's open, right? Just even without resistances, everything's just in a lower position. We have a lot more space in the mouth. We have a lot more space to travel in order to get up to the top and do those higher vowels and consonants. And so instead of pushing this way, we don't want to do that because then we break our posture, right? So we dig in here, we dig in here. Up here, you're just trying to stabilize like your shape and you know center of gravity and position and stuff. But down here, you are keeping the posture in place by counterbalancing what that sound wants to do. The E wants to pull things this way, even though you're pushing it this way when you form it. But because we have to lift and tense and do all the things, it wants to pull things with it. So you do get some stabilization. You sort of create a more solid floor here, so that especially the front of the tongue, but also the back of the tongue to a lesser extent, can lift itself, right? Because we have our hinge here to help that front of the tongue lift itself up instead of using these pieces for articulation. So the articulation and the posture kind of like go together in the same direction, where for us, in order to help lift up and be more stable, we have to actually dig in more to keep the posture while also providing a launching pad or a stable floor for the sounds to push off of. So the 3 and the 11 have this dual function, and that makes them extra important because they stabilize the posture and they help those higher sounds to articulate. If we're doing an we're doing an ah, we're doing an eh or an ah, right? A lot of these sounds, you don't really need much of the 3 and the 11. You still might have a little resistance, a little tension here and there, but, well, okay, sorry. Oh, yeah, no, even in the ah, most of the resistance is up here. 3 and the 11 don't really do much even for ah, even though it's relatively a really, really tight sound. Um, and so, again, it's really that height, whether it's a vowel or a consonant, but especially high vowels, you need this extra sort of flooring so that the tongue can help push itself up and close that gap. Um, so, and that's the other reason why I think this bottom up approach is so useful and important because uh, so many things can go wrong here. If this is wrong, I might be throwing this off. If this is wrong, I might be throwing this off, right? It has ripples either way. So you do still want to start with the valve because that could be pushing up into there anyway. um, and make sure you're nice and open and everything. But then you really want to focus on stabilizing that first floor before worrying too much about this. Not that you can't, do this along the way, but this is going to take the priority because it's literally like in the middle of it, right? If you didn't have your first floor here, your second floor would just be floating, right? It would just fall through the ground. So, um, very important in that dual function. And then, of course, the 11 in particular also has a primary function of resisting in a way that will allow the valve to not really need to resist much. You might feel a little stabilizing tension in the valve here and there, just kind of keep it in place, but you don't really have to like resist the sound. So you don't have to like add down and back in your 9 when you're doing your E because the 11 is protecting it, right? So, um, anyway, Ellen is here. Whoops, wrong one. Hello, Ellen. Thanks for your videos. I look for response. No problem. Thank you. Glad that you're finding them useful. And Istanbul, very nice. And then in Turkey. Sorry, I'm in America. My geography is terrible. I think that's in Turkey. I don't know if I'm wrong. Then feel free to hate me. I'm sorry. But anyway, the to finish this up really quick, the 7. So the 7 originally I labeled that as a soft palate, but as I was talking about last time, I realized that there's actually like little muscles up through here in the nose that you can sort of squeeze or widen to get different effects. Yeah, Turkey. Okay, cool. I'm not dumb. No, not that dumb, I guess. Totally gonna lose my voice. My throat was like so sore after last live stream. Again, I do not talk anywhere near as much in my normal life as I do when I do these live streams. And so what I realized is that you can actually extend that, and that's not just a soft palate. That's gonna sort of shift with the posture as well. Usually depends on the exact setting, but they're usually opposite. But it basically creates sort of like at the top of a chimney, right? Like a fireplace in the house. You have a little fire in here, and then it comes out the chimney, right? And so that's cool, right? But then we also have the 8 here, which again, the 7 we don't usually talk about unless you have a nasal issue, so it doesn't get brought up as much. The 8 gets talked about even less because, again, I found that in the process of working with people, but once you start like from the bottom up, getting a lot of the other things working, the 8 doesn't tend to usually cause problems. It still can, especially if you're sort of pinching or over widening the space in the back of the mouth there. But usually, if other things are working, that's not a huge problem. But that would technically be the bottom of the chimney, which then again attaches back into that 9 and valve area on the foundation, right? So it's like a perfect image now. It's an even better house framework than what I had before. You're not definitely. I know. So now it looks like there's not a roof on here, which is unfortunate, but I don't want to put a something on here for no reason. The 6, right? This little area in here, the 6 is another one of those areas that uh kind of over time I stopped really focusing on it and worrying about it because again, if you get everything else working, the 6 kind of takes care of itself. However, what I've started to kind of realize more recently is the 6 actually does have a role. Usually, the biggest problem that will happen in the six, especially for beginners, is when you open the jaw. So you're trying to say an ah or an ah. You, especially depending on how you open the jaw, that can be a little different from language to language. It's a little more trickier subject, but you can actually pinch into this six area and then like ah ah ah. It causes problems, right? And that could partially be because your valve is messing up or whatever, but it's usually a six issue. And so we don't want to push that six out as I talked about before. You just want to kind of relax it, let it sort of open up. And that would be the base setting. But what I realized the function of the six is it's a bit of a bridge between the three and the nine, right? And that was the original identification that I found. That's why I isolated that little piece as a separate part, because I was like, well, it's a bridge between sort of this muscle here and the throat there. And that's still true, but I also recently realized that it also connects into that top throat where our pitch control is in there. And so it covers actually all of this area and it acts as sort of a crossroads that helps make sure that these pieces don't break each other. Right? Because as I said, if you push down in your 3 and you do that wrong, or you do it, maybe, like, too hard or too you don't remove some of your tension, you're fighting your tension or whatever, you can directly or indirectly end up tightening that top throat. But if your 6 is working, it's gonna help protect that top throat a little bit because you won't actually be able to push into it so much. There's wiggle room there. I mean, even I could break it if I wanted to. But it's a little sort of guard rail. Um Also, in terms of this is going to be more interesting for some of you who are maybe more advanced and used to all these concepts. If you're working on rhythm and intonation and stress, this top throat pitch area, some of my more advanced students, where we do include like stress, basic intonation, rhythm in the course. It's a minor focus until as we get more and more through the course, if it still lingers, we'll eventually maybe shift to focusing on that a little bit more as we tie up loose ends and stuff. Shushin, welcome. Um, but what I've realized is that because I have these students that like, okay, they're this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good. Things are working, but then when they try to go through that stress change for the pitch or whatever, right? So like a stress syllable, what tends to happen is that top of the throat, again, it's gonna be stable and work within a set range. Okay, it's gonna maybe be kind of pushing and pulling on things slightly, but it sort of operates within that range. As long as it's within that range, you're gonna be fine. And what these students end up doing, because maybe their six isn't working, that's one possible reason, but because their six isn't working, when they go to raise that pitch, they actually end up pushing maybe up through the three, they'll end up pushing up through their 11, and then usually they'll sound better on the fall down. They'll sound like they're more in place again, but they sound like they get out of place at the height. And so I actually identified, oh, that's because this is pushing into this, and you're not using your six to protect the three and the 11 from the top throat. So that's another new little insight that I got. And those of you who are more advanced might find that more directly useful. So that's the six, but the six isn't on here because there's no place to put it. It has this sort of like intermediary role between, I guess, the three, the 11, and the valve. So I guess maybe the six would maybe sort of be the glue between the first floor and the foundation. Again, different ways to look at things, but that fits nicely, right? Okay. So that's our updated house framework. We're going to keep that in mind as we do our deep dive here. I'll get some comments really quick. Let's see. I wanted to ask you about AI, like how some people pronounce it to be exact, like it's more of a Midwestern thing. If I had to guess, oh, AI. I read it was like AI. Okay. Um, Maybe just the northern part of the country. Um, about I, like how some people pronounce it. I mean, so there's going to be that's one of the sounds that's going to be really susceptible to variations in pronunciation and maybe slight posture variances. Yeah, if you go to like the South, again, there's like a range of accents in the South, but if you say something like, "Look at the sky, look at the sky, what a beautiful sky today," A's and I's, yeah, okay. There's gonna be a little bit of an accent on it. It's gonna be, but it's not really because of I itself necessarily. It might be articulated a little bit differently, but there's gonna be a little bit of maybe a slight different posture going on or something. I do think the South, which this sort of creeps up a little bit into the Midwest, depending on what we're looking at, but that is probably gonna have uh, in the South. I think like a Texas accent, for example. I think other like sort of like the Southern Belle or Georgia or whatever, that type of accent, there probably is a little bit more of a posture difference, especially due to like the historical French accent or French emphasis. I can't talk. French influence through like Louisiana and all that stuff. Um, but if you go to say like Texas, for example, to me, Texas seems like it's like almost identical in the posture, maybe a little bit tighter on the back, and then they just like do the vowels a little bit differently. They sort of round them out a little bit more, get that sort of southern drawl as we talk about. So if you're more from Texas, you might talk a bit more like this. A Texan would probably laugh me out of town, but you know, it is what it is. Maybe it's a pretty decent Texan accent. I don't know. Um, but anyway, yeah, I don't really care. I know it's an interesting question. I mean, if you're going for more of a Midwestern sound, then I guess that's important. But when it comes to a lot of these like hair splitting little differences, I don't really care, and I don't really find them particularly important because I'm just broadly teaching you how to have like a neutral general American accent, which again, there's variation in that, and you can pick one of the variations, you know, pick and choose and build your own thing. But like doing cot merger or not doing cot merger doesn't matter. So yeah, whatever. Is barely there and becomes out or something. I'm not sure about. It sounds different from the standard I. So that's more of what I've talked about before called cutting the diphthong. I wouldn't really say it becomes an although the center of gravity is there, so you might hear a little bit of that influence. So like ah, you hear that little bit of underneath there as we release the starting point. So I don't think that's like the trying to articulate an it's just you're literally just hearing the center of gravity come through at the end of the sound. But again, that's cutting the diphthong. I could do that too. Like, look at the sky, 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 sky. You can either like do just the start or do a little bit towards the end point. But if you're speaking more clearly and more slowly, you can't really cut the diphthong. Like the slower, more clearly you speak, the less you can cut the diphthong. So, um, yeah, and then of course, you know, people get lazy and this and that and whatever, and real speech is messy. But that I think that would be more cutting the diphthong rather than being like a regional or anything to do with um, I specifically, because you do that with a and oi and ow as well. Definitely not. Yeah, it's good that you're hearing things though, because your ears are working, right? Again, I wouldn't really worry about it, especially if it's like a southern thing. Don't worry about it unless you're trying to develop a southern accent. Don't even worry about it. Okay. Sorry. I like to go in order. If you're still here, I appreciate you being patient as I seemingly ignored you. You are more being in your skin now compared to your older videos. Great with transition. Oh, thank you very much. Yay. See, and that's what I'm saying. You know, like that's what people in my life say. People have known me since, well, my entire life, but since I was like a teenager, right, 20 years ago. You know, like my friend's mom, who's currently one of my roommates, along with my friend. Yeah, she's like, I don't understand it, but you know, she's like, you know, up there in age. She's like, I don't understand it, but you're a lot happier than you were before, right? And so I support it. Great, right? I feel happier and all this stuff. In fact, I'm gonna be talking about a lot of this in my directly and indirectly in some of my first videos that I release on the second channel. I almost have that whole like 15 or so videos sort of outlined and ready to record for that second channel. Like I was talking about last time, I'm rebooting my second channel, more personal, talking about politics, trans issues, probably veganism, witchcraft, spirituality stuff, just things that I'm interested in and whatever. Maybe some news, political news and stuff. But That's coming soon. Stay tuned. But yeah, see, I'm glad that you noticed that, right? And of course, when I'm talking about things like this that I'm kind of like interested in, naturally sort of animated by, like I like pronunciation and stuff, I'm gonna be a little more upbeat and whatever. But still, yeah, you can see compared to my old videos, there's just something different, right? That's because I feel more comfortable in my skin. Like I'm still in transition. This is not my final form, but old Frieza, terrible impression. Um, I'm still transitioning. I'm still going through changes. I'm still, hoping for, I have certain goals that I'm trying to reach with that. But just that internal shift, that internal sort of peace and centeredness, reclaiming, reconnecting with that part of myself that was repressed for so long. Yeah, of course, I'm going to be more comfortable in my skin. I'm going to be more expressive and more in touch with my emotions. It's not just because I'm on estrogen. um, so yeah, well, thank you for commenting that, and thank you for noticing, and thank you for the support. Yeah, awesome. Um, yeah, I just find these things very interesting when it comes to American accents. Yeah, no, that's cool. Um, can you mimic other U.S. or other English accents, and do you teach them? Uh, so as I was mentioning a minute ago, first of all, welcome. I'm probably gonna. I want to say because I'm gonna butcher it. Pio Trucito. It's probably terrible. I'm sorry. Um, but that seemed like maybe that's Italian or something. If I'm wrong, feel free to hate me because I don't know. It's based off of my experience and references. Um, I was just kind of doing that a little bit, like with the Texan accent. Sometimes I can do sometimes I can do more of that like Southern Belle type sound, a little bit more of that French Louisiana influence. That gets mixed up and stuff. It's hard for me to like maintain an accent because I haven't like tried to master any particular accent. I've just like I've played with things. I find them fun. I've had exposure to them. Um, Sometimes I could do an Australian accent, and sometimes it doesn't come out as Australian. Sometimes I could do a really good British accent, and it might shift into some other thing or be unstable. So, yeah, I can do plenty of things. When it comes to, and I could do a little bit maybe of like, I don't want to call it a New Yorker accent because I can't really do a New Yorker, but so that more like more that Boston sound. Yeah, get the car, get in the car. It's sort of a stereotypical pop culture thing. I can do some of that as well. I think most people can. I don't particularly care very much. I speak Western American English, which covers literally like half the country, and even within that, there's little pockets here and there where there might be some further variation, especially in some areas of California where they might have more of like that's Texan. See, again, I can't watch it, but don't wait. They might have more of more of a sort of a surfer bro, like what's up, bra? That type of sound. Not all Californians sound like that. I'm from California. I don't sound like that. But Western American English is a neutral accent. We don't have one neutral accent. We have a range. There's like at least 3 or 4 different neutral accents. I have a whole video on it. You can look it up. English hacks, range of neutral accents in American English or something like that. And you'll find a thumbnail as a map of the United States with a bunch of circled areas. Um, but there's going to be subtle little differences. Like I have the cot merger, so I don't say hot or I don't say cot and caught. I say cot. It's goes a little bit farther back. The aw disappears, comes down. There's no lips anymore. Most people in the country have that these days. It's been sort of taking over the country for the last 4 or 5 decades. But there's still people who don't have the cot merger. They still use those two sounds. Um, and to me, a lot of time my brain just filters it out. But to me, it sounds like when I hear that, when I hear someone say hot or cot or something like that, or I hear them say like caught or saw or something like that, it sounds like a little bit of an accent to me. Even though that's the standard neutral accent that's like taught by most teachers, it sounds like an accent to me because that's not my neutral accent. And same thing to these people who don't have the cot merger. When they hear me say saw and hot and caught and whatever, they're probably gonna maybe notice sometimes, maybe yes, maybe no. Sounds a little bit weird. Sounds a little bit different. Why do you say it that way? But otherwise, we generally just sound American. Same thing with you add ing to the end of words. Or even if it's not added at the end of the words, you can use the E vowel or you can use the I vowel. The standard way it's taught is I. You say ring, you say thinking, or sorry, thinking, um, et cetera, et cetera. But you can also say ring, you can say thinking. Um, it doesn't matter. There's going to be little variation. Some people might notice it, but neither are not neutral. So that's my focus. I go into all that because, or I mentioned all that because that's my focus. I don't care about every little like minor difference in detail among US accents or other English accents or whatever. It's useful, it's interesting, but most of what I focus on when I'm teaching you guys is, again, it's English hacks. So like I teach the cot merger. You don't have to use the cot merger, but most of the people I teach are like, yeah, I'd rather learn one sound than two, right? Makes learning English easier. It's already complex, more complicated than it has to be. Why don't you make it easier, right? You'll still sound natural and neutral. Some people will notice occasionally. Okay, weird. If you do it the other way, other people are going to notice occasionally. There's no winning. There's nothing that's right. If you start getting into more of like, again, like the Southern accents or the New Yorker accent or something like that, yeah, that's more regional. That's more variation. That's not a neutral type accent. If I were to do more of a British accent, for example, that's that. Australia. If I wanted to sound like I'm more from Australia, I'd probably be more in the back of my mouth. Sort of like a mix between British English and American English. Can't really do like a solid, consistent Australian English, or accent. But I could do, I think, an okay Australian accent, more or less. Dingo ate my baby. That's a stereotype. Anyway, yes. So the thing that you've all been waiting for the last half hour, as I've been rambling about other things, let's do that deep dive into our front vowels. We're not going to worry too much about the We're not going to worry too much about the ah. Those are our first two base sounds that we learn in the course, and part of the reason is to help differentiate the two and make sure we have a nice, good, solid posture as we start moving things around a little bit. We're going to focus in on that e, and a. Now, we're not going to worry too much about the a today, and we're not going to worry too much about the I, which the start of it would technically be more the front middle, still kind of in the front vowel area. So we're not going to talk about the diphthongs that are in the front, just the monophthongs. So we're going to do e, and a. And feel free to leave comments and ask questions along the way. I will eventually get to them, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and just talk about this for the moment. Now, part of the reason why I thought to just do this random impromptu live stream is because I was literally talking about this in my last class earlier today. And Australian sounds more clear in British English. Yeah, Australian can be a bit messy. So there's a few things. Again, we're doing a deep dive. We're not just going to talk about the posture. We're going to talk about the articulation of these sounds. We're going to talk about the structures of these sounds, which I have mentioned before. I don't think I have like an official one reference source for that, but I have talked about it. So E and I share a structure. E and A share a structure. And this is going to give some people some much needed clarity on the reality underlying tense versus lax vowels and why I don't really use those concepts, particularly between these two. We'll get to that. I can almost guarantee that anybody, no matter how much you watch this channel or how long you've been learning English, pretty much everybody will learn something from this. Okay. Let's talk posture. Okay. Again, we're going to go bottom up following our house. Okay. We're going to go over those settings and you can sort of follow along. I'll pretend like you're a student and I can't really hear you. So I may give you a little space to, repeat after me or something if you want to follow along. But this would also mimic like if you were doing it yourself using a reference recording from me, right? You can like play the reference and then try to repeat and whatever. So it'll also be good for your self practice. Doesn't have to be even these particular sounds. This will help you in other sounds. This will help you in sentences, et cetera, et cetera. This is sort of a basic process that you can go through. So we're going to start at the bottom there and we're going to check our valve. Okay. Now, for those of you who don't know all these pieces, don't know what I mean by valve, not vowel, valve. see other videos. Sorry, I'm not going to take the time to go into all that today. I've talked about that multiple times in previous live streams, most recent live streams. So you're going to have to catch up there. You can come back. So we have our mid throat setting. We have our 9 there. Okay. Those are the two pieces of the valve. It's easiest and best generally to come down here to the middle throat first. Make sure that you're not manipulating that top. We don't want to pull that top down. If your posture is higher, the top will come down with everything else, but you're not directly pushing down or engaging that top throat. Okay. So you want to make sure that your middle throat is low. It's nice and relaxed wide. Okay, no pinching, no squeezing, none of that. Some people feel like they're like from the back of the throat, they're squeezing forward into the front. Okay, particularly in the front area of this, you want to make sure that you're not squeezing. Okay, very important. No narrowness. We want to relax wide. Don't push wide, relax wide. Remove your tension. If it feels relaxed to you and you're still squeezed, it's trust me, you can relax wider. Okay. And then you have to stabilize it. You have to sort of hold it there, give it a little structure. Okay. But you relax wide, you come down, middle throat goes forward. Everything else in the posture will go backward. Okay. So you're going to come forward, open up that space there. Okay. Then for the 9, of course, this line that it tends to be a bit raised to varying degrees in other languages, we're going to actually feel that shift compared to your posture. If you don't feel that line in this area up in here actually shift, like flipping a light switch, you're not doing it right. Again, the width is very important. You should relax wide and let it sort of open up and fall down and back in order to fully get it into place. Moving this out of the way will allow that to come down more easily. But again, you have to stabilize it, give it a little structure. Okay. Now, if we're talking about our basic setup, that would be for that. Okay. Your 3, again, a little bit lower probably than your language. A lot of languages just hold the 3 higher. We're not talking resistances yet. We're talking basic posture. So remove any of your tension, let it come down, let it just sort of sink. Again, the 4 is on the side, no pinching, let it just relax. 3 comes down, it just sets lower. You sort of push down a little bit to lock in. That usually helps people. Okay. Just give it a little bit of structure, a little tension, bam. Good 3. You're 11. We don't want it to go that way. We don't want it to be pinched. Again, the width is very important. Just a little bit of pinch can push you out of place. So do not be narrow. Do not be tight pinching from side to side. Again, that's like if you take your hand and you grab the back of your tongue. We don't want to be doing that. Okay. So your 11 should feel like it's relaxing wide. You should feel like you're coming down and back. If you do it correctly, it depends on your native language and where your setting is. But for a lot of people, especially if you're a Japanese speaker, because that seems to be the highest and tightest that I found. But Russian speakers, Spanish speakers, even German speakers, to a lesser extent, you should feel almost as if this root of your tongue area is sort of falling into your throat. Okay. And that 9, you opened up that 9 space. So now it can sort of fall into that space and you will still have space without choking yourself. If your 9 is lifted and you let your 11 go like that, you're not going to have space. You're not going to sound good. Oh, okay. Now, it is possible to go too far. So you should feel that your 9's in place, your 11's in place, and that you still sound clear. As long as you still sound clear, you say, it doesn't sound like, like you're not blocking anything, then you're fine. Okay. But you're going to have to come down and back more than you think you have to. Okay. It's probably going to feel very extreme. You're going to feel like you're choking yourself. But if you sound clear, that's what you want. Okay. You'll get used to it. Your brain will stop freaking out eventually. So we're going down, back, and wide there. That's our base setting. 5, of course, center of gravity goes this way. This is where the sound is. So we're placing it there. Your back of tongue is low. You're going to dig in here with your 5, dig in here with your 5. This is just base setting. Just make sure you're not up like this, pushing this way or raised. Let it come down. Let it come back again. No pinching. That's a big problem on the 5. Let it come wide. 1 and 2. Again, that's where we have our shape. You have that line between the front and the middle, touching the corners of the 4th teeth. So that's your 4th teeth there. You get this nice little shape. Okay, ugly drawing, but that's what we want. We don't want it to be like this. We don't want it, we don't want it to be like this. We don't want it to be like this. We don't want it to be like a super extreme half pipe or anything. That's it's going to give you other problems. Okay, just a nice, gentle, higher on the sides, lower in the middle, relaxed, wide. Okay, good shape. Think of it as hanging from the teeth rather than lifting the sides. That's going to help you get a nice, good, relaxed, sort of low, wide position without bringing in extra tension. Okay, so that's all our base settings. Of course, the front of the tongue is very low. It's just sort of relaxing, no tension. Your center of gravity might be the our start of the diphthong A, in which case you're probably going to have some tension here on the front of the tongue. That's another problem. Relax it, let it go. That might take some time, but that's a common center of gravity, and you don't want to hold that tension there. The front of the tongue should literally just feel like it's sort of hanging from the fourth tooth, just like the sides here. You're just sort of hanging off and, again, pulled back from the teeth, not touching or really close to those bottom teeth. Okay, so that's our base position. So in our sounds here, we want to essentially maintain those things, okay, while articulating the sounds. So I set all that up and did a little review there, even though if you're familiar with that, because again, is your base. Unfortunately, some people take a while to get It's very normal to not master the until about halfway through the course. And you might actually start mastering or getting close to mastering these sounds before you get the believe it or not. It seems backwards, it seems weird. Trust the process, okay? It works. So your might not yet be perfect, but you should be trying to get these pieces as good as you can in your as a base reference for what you're doing in these to try to maintain those pieces. Okay. Now, for the sounds themselves, all of these areas are going to be needing to do something except for the valve. Okay. So your valve, you will maybe feel a little bit of wiggle room. You might feel a little bit of structure stabilizing here and there as sounds are moving around. But the valve, unlike the other posture pieces, it doesn't really do much heavy resistance. It's not going in a direction. It's just where it is. And maybe you get a little static tension to hold it in place. That's it. If your 11 isn't working, especially in a sound like an E or a T, that probably will threaten to destroy your valve. And so you might feel a lot of tension here because your 11's not working. Again, they're all kind of interconnected in some way. But if you try to say E, and you feel you have to add significant resistance in this area, something is going wrong. Either A, you're bringing in your tension and having to fight against it from your native posture, or again, your 3, probably your 11, something else is either bringing in tension or trying to pull that back towards your native settings. And so that's okay. If as long as you don't feel like you're directly changing the valve itself, you're like, that's pretty close. That's mostly the same. I don't really feel like I'm like pushing in the middle. I'm not raising my 9 very much. I feel like, okay, great. It's close. It's similar. Then probably once you fix this and get it working with that, it'll fix the problem. Okay. So don't feel like you have to get this perfect before moving on because other pieces might be trying to interfere with it. Just try to make sure it stays mostly the same. So you go down, you try to feel your middle throat, especially the middle throat. Feel that 9. I know it's hard. It's it's almost impossible, if not impossible, to kind of feel from the outside here. It's just sort of up in here. You have to get used to feeling the muscles themselves and hearing differences in what you're doing. But we go, again, you can whisper. I talked about the whisper before. Make sure that you don't have a lot of tension here. You should mostly hear it in the mouth. Okay, that can sort of help make sure that the valve is okay. If you think that's more or less good, okay, it's close enough. Go to your E. E, uh, E. Again, you might see or feel a little bit of stabilization, a little bit of wiggling around, but it's not drastically moving. It's not drastically resisting, just stabilizing itself. No big deal. Of course, my 11 is working, my 3 is working. So, okay. So as long as that feels mostly the same, sounds mostly the same through here, we're going to say check. Okay. So then your valve is there. You're going to go to your 3. That's your next step. Okay. Why the 3 rather than the 11? Because the 3 is easier to manipulate. It's easier to kind of feel. You can put your hand here and feel it doing different things. And the 11 is a little bit more complicated. So we're going to do the 3 first. Plus, it's technically a little lower. Okay. So your 3, when you go and do your E, I should probably talk about where the E is too, right? This is a deep dive. The E, of course, as I've mentioned before, we're going to cut this in half. We're not on the front half, we're on the back half. That E is going to come up somewhere around here, roughly. It's going to be sort of a high, relatively tight sound. It's one of the tighter sounds in the language. Be careful with tightness. Okay. It's relatively tight. And all of these sounds, E, they're roughly going to kind of be in a staircase pattern on this area. Now, there's other places to put them. I've talked about that before. This is the basic way I teach it. This is the way that I get the best results from people. But if you have a slightly different way of doing it, then you can just adapt. Okay. Adapt the posture information to what you're doing. Okay. So the E we're going to say is approximately in here. Again, this is not to scale. It's just going to be somewhere up around here. This is going to lift up. You're going to place it there. Okay. So when you go and you lift that up and you do that, you should feel that your valve is still fairly stable. Okay. Shouldn't really change any. When you go and you do the 3, okay. So again, as I was saying earlier, in a lot of languages, that 3 is already higher. But then in order to help lift the into the E position, a lot of languages might actually push a little bit higher or just not do anything. But definitely you wouldn't come down. Different postures are different. I don't know the posture and the resistance patterns of every single language. So I'm just going off of what I've most commonly seen. Your language may vary, but most likely what I'm saying will match your language based on my experience. So you're either probably going to just be high by default and not change anything, or you might actively push up as you try to form that E in order to help lift it and support the articulation of that sound. Okay, you don't want to do that. You don't want any upward tension. You want to make sure again that you're starting lower in the That's why we talked about that. You lock it in. Okay. If you feel like your 3 is low enough and good, you can always push in more. Double check, play with it, find where it's good. If your sounds pretty great, you feel like your 3 is nice, then you say, okay, I know that I have to push down through the 3. Again, you won't feel much up here because there's not a whole lot going on through this way, but you're going to feel it mostly through here. Okay, you put your hand here. I always recommend when you're testing a 3, you put your hand here because it's harder to feel itself directly. Even for me, I put my hand here. I can usually feel it better. I can feel how it's tensing. I can feel when it's pushing down or not. Okay, and there is variation. There's more subtlety here than just pushing down. That's something that I'm exploring and getting more conscious of. But the base simple thing to do is add some downward tension. Okay, give a little static squeeze and push down. That will create a little bit more of a floor down here that the E can then help push itself up off of, okay? In combination with the hinge, it's gonna be able to lift itself, okay? Again, don't be confused. We're not pushing this way to form the sound. The tongue is lifting and shaping into that position, but all vowel sounds push this way into the tongue. Okay, if I do an ah, an e, could be an oo up back here. Okay, I always feel like I'm pushing this way, like there's a little pressure. My fingers just pushing. So if I lift the front of my tongue and I shape my e, I feel like I'm pushing on that spot right there. Okay, very important that we don't confuse that because all it takes is trying to push this way to form the sound. You bring in your posture, or you just sound a little unnatural and weird because we don't do it that way. Okay, don't confuse position and lifting of the tongue with the I don't want to say that. The articulatory pressure of placing the sound on that part of the tongue, right? They go together, of course, but they're not the same. Okay. Then we have our 11. Okay, so we go to our 11. And unfortunately, right off the bat, E is special in the 11. Both the E and the Y. I think E a little bit more so because Y has a little bit more help from the side. But both of these, what I've noticed, and if I do it very lazily, I don't necessarily have to worry too much about it. But if I do a nice, good, solid E sound, I do notice that not only does the 11, again, it's already down and back, it's already relaxed wide, it's in place for that's our starting position. Okay, relax any of your tension. But from that starting position, you, instead of just, I can't talk today. Instead of just resisting down and back, like you might in a T, right? If you lift up for a T, you're going to feel a little bit of dig in here. It's not necessarily moving the position so much, but you're going to feel tension trying to dig in there, again, to tighten up that floor and help the front of the tongue lift. The T is going to be up more here, right? But the E, because it doesn't have as much structural support along the sides as like a T or an S would, roughly kind of the same as the Y. It also has a little less structural support. It needs to kind of float there. It's a high floating vowel, or all vowels float, I guess, in a way. kind of, maybe they don't all float, but none of them get close enough to create like friction and stuff with another part of the mouth, right? So it needs to sort of stabilize and structure itself. And so in order to do that, especially because our posture is already low and we have to really lift it up there, um, that 11, instead of just going down and back like that, I feel like it tenses down and back, but it also feels almost like it gets this sort of egg shape. Now, before I said it's going to feel like you're sort of falling into the throat. This is an actual, it feels like a compressed pressure. Almost like instead of just like there's this nice little rounded 11, right? Sort of on the root of the tongue, instead of just kind of sort of resisting, I actually feel like it compresses into sort of like the top of an egg. So you get this sort of egg shape. Um, and again, don't pinch from side to side. That's a big mistake. You're not compressing width. The width still needs to stay narrow. You might get a little bit of resistance to keep it wide. Sorry, I said the width needs to stay narrow. Width needs to stay wide, relaxed wide, but you might give a little structure to keep it there. Do not pinch, do not narrow. Big mistake. But from sort of top to bottom or front to back, you'll kind of feel like you're digging in a little bit more like an egg shape. And that again will help create that solid floor so that the E can then push off of it and lift itself up. Okay. And they're sort of like pushing against each other. Okay. So because the E of its unique position and shaping and tension, somewhat unique, the Y shares it to some extent, that demands more on the 11 to not only keep the posture in place, to not be pulled out of place by the E, but then also to provide that platform for the E to push off of to form itself. Again, the 3 and the 11 are articulatory supports as well as posture stabilization supports. Okay. So the id, ed, ah, you don't got to worry about that egg shape. It's just in the E and then maybe to a lesser extent the Y. Those are the only sounds in the language that do that. Okay. Otherwise, you're never going to have that sort of special egg shape. There are a couple other sounds that I probably mentioned before, like the dark L, the and the that get this sort of like rotating thing in the 11. Those are also special cases, right? The 11 is unfortunately, because it has to stabilize the valve against all these different sounds and stuff as things are moving around. It's very flexible and adaptable and does different things in certain sounds. But usually you're going to feel some down and back, or if a sound is up here, you're just going to feel some down. That's the most common pattern. So it's not completely chaotic. Don't freak out and worry that it's super difficult. It's just a moving piece. That's what makes it hard. Okay. Anyway, so that's your 11. You get a little egg shape there. Great. Now, so far in how I'm approaching this bottom up thing, I have come to the stance, I guess, that we start down here, right? Because that's your foundation. And then we do these, particularly 3 and then 11. Maybe I'll change that order at some point, whatever. But that's your first floor. I don't know what if it would be best to do 1, 2, and then 5, or do 5 and then 1, 2. Probably doesn't matter really. Whichever one, like, I mean, you can even break the order of these if you wanted to. If you want to go top bottom and it gives you a better result, fine. I don't care. As I've said before, you can do the opposite of what I tell you to do. As long as you get the result, you can do whatever you want. I'm just going based off of my experience, giving you guys tips and ideas, and going off of what I know helps and what works. Okay. Um, let's just say we go to the 5. Okay. So the 5 again is going to be, it's going to go over that center of gravity plus the back of the tongue because they work together. Even though the center of gravity is technically in the middle, it does overlap that 1, 2 shape, but it's going to dig in and resist this way along with the 5. It does exactly the same thing. Whatever the back of the tongue is doing in terms of posture resistance, the center of gravity almost always, there's a couple exceptions based on a couple weird sounds, but it essentially always, like 99% of the time, will do exactly the same thing. It wants to go down and back, dig in, maintain that part of the posture. So they work as a unit, even though there's this line here and they're technically not on the same part of the tongue, but they do work as one unit. Okay. So we know in our we're down back, we're nice and wide, no pinching. Okay. Your tongue should probably feel lower, like especially even if you don't speak Japanese, which is super high and tight. If you speak like Russian or Spanish and you have just an overall higher tongue, I've had plenty of students speaking those languages that when they finally got their posture down into place, they're like, my tongue has to be that low. That's crazy. So if it doesn't feel too low, you're probably not low enough. Again, bottom up. It's part of why we're doing that. But make sure you're low, make sure you're back, Make sure you're not pinching, you're relaxed wide, very important in the 5. Just a little pinch in the 5 here can ripple through the entire thing and throw the sound off, okay? Um, so for our basic that's just our position. Remove your attention, add our structure, done. You go into your E, okay. Uh, E, and again, you do transitions. Transitions are really good for helping to feel these changes as you move between sounds, but I'm just gonna do a jump here. Uh, E. So I can feel that I'm keeping more or less the same height. It's not really moving too much, but I do feel that this is getting some tension. This is getting some tension. This is getting some tension. There's some resistance. Like it's kind of digging in against like a counterbalance against that E. Again, different part of the posture, different area of the tongue, but still a counterbalance against what the sound is doing. Just depends on what the sound is doing and how it's affecting that piece. That's all the posture, all these resistances, that's all they're doing. They're just essentially counterbalances. These do help with the articulation of those high sounds, yes, but they're still in their resistances, they're counterbalances. Um, okay, so that's all you got to do. The 5 is usually not that big of a deal. Maybe take some practice, but that's the 5. Okay, and then for the 1 and 2 in your center here, so we have our nice good shape. You have your 4th tooth along the start of that middle tongue, not too sharp. Okay, uh, along the corners of the 4th tooth, not in between the teeth, not way up, between the teeth and the top of the mouth. And then when you do your E is going to want to destroy that shape, especially through the front half of the middle. Okay, the closer you get to the E, the more it wants to sort of lift it and flatten it and collapse it and do all kinds of weird things with it. So you just want to maintain the shape. This is literally probably the easiest thing to do. Transition really, really useful for this is you just slowly you can feel that resistance as this forms. You resist down. Okay, it also helps in my experience if you resist down and back, not just down. Because again, the sound is, we're pushing this way onto the sound, but because of how the sound is being formed, it wants to pull everything into itself that way. So always work with the posture, not against the posture. And you just maintain the shape. It should be exactly the same as you shouldn't feel any higher or lower. You shouldn't feel any more forward or backward. You shouldn't feel like the shape changes, but you will feel a difference in the tension. Instead of just being super relaxed wide, it will get a little bit tight because it needs to resist. So you should feel a change in the sense that there's resistance, but you shouldn't feel a change in any other way, the shape, the position, any of that. Okay. And there's always a little bit of wiggle room. That's fine. But try to keep it exactly the same as Okay, that's how the E resists. Now we're going to talk about the I, and then we're going to talk about the structure that these share. Okay. Um, before I do that, let me catch up on the comments really quick. Okay. About I sounding softer, like wind. It is a slippery sound. I don't really have any particular comments or thoughts on that. If you can maybe, I cannot think of words today. I don't not extrapolate. That's words coming to my head. If you want to maybe clarify, give a little bit more details of what you mean by sounding softer. I can maybe come back to that, but can you give some sound example coming down from the high position to the wanted low wide one? I don't know what you mean by sound example because the posture is always low and wide. Sounds will lift, sounds will raise, articulations will come up, but the posture is always trying to keep itself low and wide. So I think unless maybe you mean between like two languages. So if you have like an E in Spanish and an E in English, maybe. Again, I'm getting pretty good at Spanish posture, I think, but I don't have it mastered. I can give you an example of that. So, without going into all the details, basically everything I just described would, in many ways, be reversed, right? So this is going to go in, everything's going to go up, everything in the mouth is going to go forward. Your 9 is going to lift this way. You're going to get more pinched, more narrow. I have some Spanish speakers tell me it feels like their tongue is wider. Some Spanish speakers tell me it feels like they're more narrow. A lot of people, it feels like the tongue has some more narrow tension. So I don't know. There might be some variations. Maybe I just haven't quite nailed down the Spanish yet. So I'm still not sure on the exact width if it's actually wider than ours or more narrow than ours. Um, in terms of like the tongue up here, the surface of the tongue. Definitely pinching like in the 11 and in the 5, there's some tension there, but we're gonna set all that aside. If I do like an E in Spanish, it's gonna sound very similar. So if I go like, okay, if I an E in English, E, E, E. If I try to do more of a Spanish E, let's see. Eh, eh, E, 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 E. I still have my 1 and 2 shape. It's hard for me to get rid of that completely. Let me try my 3 also, because I think my 3 is pushing down. A. Yeah, see my 3 is already pushing down as I'm trying to do A. A, A. Yeah, like, as soon as I try to add voice and do the A, I feel my 3 push down. So I'm really struggling getting that 3 under control. That's, like, the big weakness that I'm experiencing. That's why I recently realized more about how the 3 works and how important it is and redid the house framework thing, but E, okay. E, maybe it sounds a little more French, but E, E. I can't do it perfectly, but just trying to sort of switch some of those things up. You could probably hear there's like a little bit of a difference in the quality. It's the same sound, but it sounds a little bit different underneath. So maybe if I do like the if I do like pues yo no sé, and then if I do like pues yo no sé, that's more of like an American posture. Clearly, there's a little bit of a different sound there. And not all Spanish speakers will agree with me. I don't know, but based off of the couple Spanish speakers I have talked to, including recently to a Spaniard, I know there's little variations and stuff and whatever. But based on those changes that I just tried to make, I do generally get feedback saying that I sound more Spanish. So, okay. Uh, should we keep the hinge while doing the schwa? The hinge, that fourth tooth hinge, that is a structural guidepost. In itself, the fourth tooth is not important. Okay, that's something that I wasn't aware of earlier in the course because I found that whole fourth tooth hinge concept in the literature, and I was like, "Yeah, that makes sense. I feel that." So I just kind of ran with it. But that's led to some confusion, and I have a subtler understanding now, which I mentioned in some recent live streams. Because like if you do like an ah or an ah, you're gonna break the physical contact, right? And if you do the even the schwa itself, you can actually get a little loose and not actually be physically touching the fourth tooth. For simplicity and for encouraging proper posture, I do just generally tell you, hey, when you're learning the you're practicing your try to make sure your fourth tooth is in contact. But me as a native speaker in real life, sometimes I'll do and I'm not actually like I just did and I'm not actually touching that fourth tooth. However, what is important is the shape. The shape is always there. If I'm doing ah, if I'm doing ah, if I'm doing that shape is always going to more or less be maintained. And the line, the part of the tongue that would be touching the fourth tooth, um, if my mouth weren't more open, is going to roughly, there's a little wiggle room, but it's going to roughly stay lined up under that tooth. So again, as I said, it's a structural guidepost. Um, rather than in itself being something that you have to maintain at all times. So don't feel like most sounds, especially the higher sounds, you will be touching the corners of the fourth teeth on the top on both sides. It's there almost all the time. Again, it's a structural element that again we're gonna talk a little bit about that here in the E actually when we after we talk about the I. But you can push into the fourth tooth a little bit to again help that tongue lift and structure itself into that E shape. So we do use it, uh, but it's a mistake to think that the point is to touch the fourth tooth. That's not the point. The point is to have the shape, and then when you need it for certain sounds, to kind of dig into it to use it to help articulate sounds. Um, okay. La 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 la. Oh, I'm Madonna. Yes. Hello. I'm Madonna. I didn't see the user there. Do Hazra is here. Welcome. Oh my god. Shared structure E and I and yes, they share structure. I'm about to get into that right now. How am I number 3? Because you suck. That's why. Do better. I don't quite. More like that in classes. No. I'm very abusive teacher. What can I say? I don't quite understand the 3. How do we push it down? Okay, so and that's good. That's a good question. So questions like that, unfortunately, come down to, well, how do I open my hand? How do I open and close my hand? Like this. I can't explain that. I can give you a description of what's happening, but I can't explain how I do this, right? It's just it's my brain sends signals and then I have muscles and it happens, right? Um, so at the end of the day, you kind of just have to figure out and just make it work. That part I can't give to you guys. I can tell you what you're supposed to do. I can tell you how it's supposed to feel. I can give you tips on things, but I can't actually give you the particular muscle control and sensation. You have to develop that on your own. Sorry. So if you have this question, number one, you might just not particularly be aware of it. Like you haven't really practiced it much, pay attention to it much. That's normal, right? If like I wasn't aware of any of this at one point in my life, and as in the process of developing this course, I've become very familiar with them, and I can feel lots of things that I couldn't feel before. So that's a natural part of the thing. Just like spend more attention, spend more time on it, play with it, right? Try to push it up, try to push it down. You'll eventually start kind of feeling, oh yeah, okay, there's a muscle in there, and I can kind of manipulate it around. So you get more familiar with it. But probably your language holds it higher. Again, a lot of languages do that. And then when you say you go up to do an E or whatever, you might even push up. So this sensation of pushing down or even have it just be lower is probably very foreign to a lot of people. Um, and again, it's not necessarily pushing down. That's sort of the shorthand, easy thing that gets results more like faster, I guess. Simplifies it a little bit. There's some nuance there. But like, for example, if I put my hand here, and if I say, and then watch what happens when I say E, right? If I go, E, E, you can see it move. Now, I'm doing it in sort of a really clear, almost exaggerated way. If I were to do a little more lazily, I say, E, you might not see it move as much, but I still feel it pushing down a little bit. Okay. So just because you don't see it move down, that's fine. But if you put your hand there, it's easier to feel if you are sort of pushing or tensing in that area. And if you don't feel that at all, in fact, if you feel maybe it's pulling away from your hand and you're pushing up, that's going to help you kind of get an idea of what you're doing. And then you just have to figure out how to make the muscle do the other thing. Right. Um, okay. Han Yen, welcome. Sorry, it takes me forever to get to people. I don't know what all that is. Is mouth posture for beginner learners, or is it only for people who speak English fluently? So ideally, and hopefully maybe one day I'll just have like the perfect English learning program. I doubt it. I don't know if I want to go that deep. I do have the English blueprint in the background that I never finished, so maybe I've thought about combining it with that. But ideally, if you were an absolute beginner, you didn't speak any English, no pronunciation, you know nothing about English, you would start learning pronunciation and mouth posture from day one. And I know a lot of English teachers would be like, "Oh, that doesn't matter, whatever, blah blah blah. Like you should learn the basics." And it's not like, okay, you try to like master your pronunciation before you learn how to speak. No, it's sort of this layered thing that I think can be layered in an ideal way with some like absorbing of grammar here and there, vocabulary, blah 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 blah. You weave all the different elements together as you're learning. You throw in a little reading and writing, even though that's visual based rather than auditory based. Supplemental as you're learning the grammar and stuff. Whatever. Okay, so you can get the whole package. Um, but in order for that to happen, like if I wanted to do that, like let's say you speak Hanyan, I'm just going to assume you're a Mandarin speaker or some sort of Chinese language speaker. If not, correct me. I would have to speak your language. I would have to speak Mandarin, right? So if I don't speak Mandarin and I can't explain all of these things to you in a very like vivid way that is easy for you to understand, like I think I can do in English. Um, then that becomes inaccessible for beginners. So it's not that mouth posture isn't suitable for beginners. It's that, in fact, mouth posture is ideal for beginners. Like, because if you're learning how to do the sounds, you should learn what the posture is, how it affects it, so that you can learn how to do the sounds correctly instead of building bad habits, right? Um, the problem isn't that it's not ideal for beginners. The problem is that there's a language barrier, and the person teaching, in this case, myself, or if anybody else were able to teach this, if I teach them, or they figure it out and teach it themselves or whatever, if they don't know your language, that's the barrier, that's the problem, because I can't answer your questions, I can't, whatever. So it's unfeasible because of the language barrier. Infeasible. um but ideally you would start with it. So if you can understand what I'm saying, right? Like if you're a lower level, but you can more or less, like, maybe you need subtitles, maybe you need to kind of like go slow and rewatch things, and you can kind of figure out what I'm saying. Um, it might be a little rocky, but you will still get benefit from it. Or if, let's say, I know YouTube has like language translation now, so like you can put on like the Mandarin version of it or whatever, and get my explanations. Again, who knows how good the AI translation is? But maybe that can make it more accessible. And then, I don't really support the current state of AI, so it is what it is. I know it's a feature, you can use it if you want. I'm not encouraging that either way, but um, that can maybe make it more accessible for you if you have trouble understanding me. And then you can just try to apply it yourself. But then, if you want to work with me, I do have a requirement of being at least lower intermediate. Um, and even then, we need to like check and make sure certain things, because yeah, like, I prefer upper intermediate or higher. So most of the students that come to me, they're advanced. Half of them are already living in the country, blah, 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 and they're just trying to get rid of their accent. So, but then part of the problem of that is we have to undo bad habits, right? So the more advanced you are, the harder relatively it's going to be for the mouth posture. Um, Not that it's impossible or anything. It's just, so like the earlier you start mouth posture, the better. That's the point. You just have to get over the language issue. How can you lift the tongue but push down on the sound at the same time? Yeah, I know. It seems counterintuitive. It's weird. So it's like, for the E, for example, you lift it up, right? So I'm clearly lifting the front of my tongue, right? I can feel that. E, E, E. Okay. So the front of my tongue comes up. And then, there's some shaping for it or whatever. And there's some structure. I dig into the fourth tooth a little bit. I have all my posture resistance. Okay. So it's there. It's lifted. But then what it feels like to me, for vowels in particular, it feels like if I had like a little tiny ball, right? And like the E is right here on this specific spot. And it's like I just put that ball right there. Like there's like almost like this little dent, kind of like how the center of gravity works when we're doing and or even when we're not doing except it'd be a little bit of a bigger ball. It sort of takes over. Like center of gravity is there for quality when we're doing other sounds. You don't want to be articulating two sounds at the same time. That's also a confusing concept. But it feels like there's a little ball, or if I could take my finger and just like put it through my mouth and just like push on that spot of my tongue. So it's like it's lifting, it's shaping, it's in position, but then I feel like I'm trying to push into that structure, that shaping, right? Push into the tongue that is lifted, in order to articulate the sound. That's what it feels like to me. Now, some people that's confusing, it doesn't work. You can think about it differently. Um, but I've had people who push in this way and immediate accent. I've had people who push this way, immediate accent, especially usually because I mixes up the posture as well, even if it's just locally in this area. So I know it could be a little weird and confusing, but I don't know. Use it if it helps. If it doesn't, then try to think of it some other way. Maybe you don't think of it as like you're pushing into it. You're just like you're creating the structure and it's just there. Okay, whatever. I think that you don't have to be fluent to speak English more clearly and in a more proportional way. You don't have to be fluent. No, I mean, you should at least probably be conversationally fluent, because if you're not conversationally fluent, then that's going to be problematic. But yeah, you don't need to like, yeah, like you don't need a bunch of like advanced fancy language and stuff, and you don't have to have perfect grammar to be clear and approachable. Yeah. Okay. Clearly, these are stacking up, and I don't want to get too far away from what I was talking about. Um, I'm going to bookmark this one right here. And I'm going to talk about the and then after I talk about the I'll maybe come back. Sorry. it sucks. I know. It's terrible for rewatch value, but this is how my brain works. I'm chaotic. Deal with it. Usually I'm doing this live and we're just focused on, live in class and we're just focused on what we're focusing on. So, anyway, okay. If you're doing an all right. So our E was sort of up around here roughly. Okay. Our is going to be a little bit down and forward. So you're still on the same section of the tongue. It's the back half of the front, but you're going to feel almost like a staircase. You're coming down and back a little bit. Okay. Again, this is not to scale. This is not perfect. This is actually a really big brush. Because the E would be in here, the A would be down here. Okay. It's all supposed to be on this side of the line. So again, it's a little messy. It's a little imperfect. Let me see if maybe I can make it. If I go like, okay, like your E is like in here. We'll put the A like here, something like that. Okay, it's a little cleaner, more space there. Okay. So if we're gonna do the I, there's a good thing here. Okay, if you can do the E and you can keep your posture, you can lift that sound, you can do all the things, and you have a nice, good sounding E. Careful, because E's already sound similar between languages. Okay, you're going for the quality of the E, not necessarily the articulation of the sound, because pretty much every language has an E. You can already articulate it, even if it's maybe in a slightly different position or something. So, okay, don't really listen to the quality, not the sound itself. The not a lot of languages have. Okay, so we have to actually worry about the articulation, make sure we're not doing an E or an or something in between or whatever else. But then also there's the posture consideration. So you should feel like you're on the same spot. You go down and back a little bit. That's the position of it. The posture, luckily, is going to be identical to the E, but less. It's exactly the same, but less. So you go down to your valve. Make sure your valve is nice and good. Okay. And then you go, again, you can transition, but, okay. Again, you should feel like it's stable. Maybe give it a little bit of stabilizing tension. That's it. You shouldn't really have to do much. It's just kind of there. You're already in place. Again, I draw this arc here because this is going this way. This is going this way. So that's confusing to some people, but we know what the valve should be, right? These two pieces. Okay. Nice and wide, nice and open. Okay. If that sounds good or more or less good, you go to your 3. Okay. What does the 3 do? Again, it's going to push down, get a little tight. Okay. Not pinching, a little static tension. Okay. So if I go, probably feel it push down a little bit. Great. Okay. That means that's working. If you feel it push up, it's not good. And again, you want to make sure you start in that good 3 position, because if your is already high in a 3, then pushing down is going to help, but you're still going to be missing something. You're never going to quite get there because you didn't start in the right spot. So that's why we try to use the as a reference as best we can. Okay. So you should feel that. If you feel that, you're probably doing something right. Good. Okay. Again, helps to articulate because we're lifting this up a bit, but then also helps to create a little bit of a floor and stabilize the posture. Okay. The 11. So you can go to your 11. Okay. What do we do with the 11? Do we do this egg shape? No, we do not do the egg shape. That's too much. We don't need that for the I anymore. However, you will, compared to the starting position, you will feel a fill. Yeah, we can reduce feel to fill, by the way. That I'm not joking. That's the thing. If you hear me say that, that's why, because I reduced it. Anyway, you will feel a clear resistance. Okay, it's going to feel, again, we're not really trying to move it farther down and back into the throat. Little wiggle room. Okay, but you're mostly going to try to feel that tension, like it's really digging in. It's not enough to make it sort of bubble into that egg shape, but there's a clear feeling of resistant tension there. And the more than most sounds, is very, very, very susceptible to an incorrect 11. So if you feel like everything's working, but your 11 or your still doesn't sound quite right, deepen that 11. You probably are nowhere near in position. Okay. Um, and again, even if like you sound better, maybe you go to I and you're like, okay, yeah, now my I sounds better. My I sounds better. You get to the end, you think everything's kind of working together more or less, but it still doesn't sound good. There's all kinds of problems that could happen, but one of the things might be, hey, maybe if you deepen the 3 and or deepen the 11 and or deepen your 1 and 2, right? Any of these pieces could usually be deepened more as you're getting more and more used to it, whether that's relaxing wider, lowering more, coming back more, maybe coming make sure this is a little bit more forward and stable. Um, Almost universally, as people are learning this, over time, they feel that they actually were not going enough, especially in the height, but that they weren't going enough into those 3 directions, especially with their resistances. So be careful, or you can always try to deepen things more and find where that line is. Just don't add your tension. Don't add too much tension in terms of static, you know, grabbing, and really avoid the width. You want to make sure it's nice and wide. So the narrowness I meant, but okay. So again, you just kind of feel it dig in, nice and strong. Eh, uh, eh, uh, eh. Okay. Um, Great. So if that sounds good, we move on to the next one. Okay, we'll go to the 5. Now 5, again, exactly the same as the E. We're gonna dig in, we're gonna dig in, we're gonna dig in. Those are our 3 resistance points on the back. Because remember, this part in the middle is where we articulate back sounds. So we're gonna not as much as E, but same thing. You're gonna feel it digging in, especially on that center of gravity. Uh, eh, uh, you might even feel like it's trying to widen a little bit. You're not trying to push it wide. It's just sort of resisting and making sure that width keeps its structure. Eh, Also very susceptible to a bad 5. If your 5 is pinching or a little push forward, it can destroy the A completely. Okay. Um, this is one reason why the I sound is so difficult for so many English learners. Um, Particularly getting a natural sounding I, but even just the sound itself, because the articulation, even if you're placing it in the right spot, having like a bad 11 or a bad 5 is often enough to make it even sound like a different sound, right? Um, Not going to be completely different necessarily, but combine that with a center of gravity up in the A, if you're still holding on to that, yeah, you're going to run into problems, right? Um, so removing your tension, again, removing your posture tension, very, very, very important. Okay. It's not just adding hours, you have to release yours as well. So that's our 5 there. Great. And then our 1 and our 2, exactly the same as the E, except again, not as much because the I is lower and a little more open. We're not lifting as much. You're not going to feel as much pressure here. That's trying to pull it up. So you resist a little less. That's fine. Great. There you go. Okay, those are your posture resistances. But what about this shared structure? Okay, because this is the other thing. Last class, when I was talking to my student, he was trying to get the I, and it's like, okay, yeah, you sound a little better here, you sound a little better here, you sound a little bit here. Um, but the 11 wasn't really. He was having trouble with the 11, and I was like, well, okay, if we talk about the structure, that might also help the 11 a little bit. Because he kept sort of like sometimes he would sound like an "eh," and then sometimes when he tried to change one of these pieces, he would sort of fall into "eh," especially the 11. Like, the more that he tried to do this, the more that the sound would fall towards the "eh." Um, and so I was like, "Okay, well, let's talk about the structure." E and I share a structure. Now, if you've been around learning languages or English in particular for, any length of time, you may have come across concepts, linguistic concepts, known as lax vowels and tense vowels. So tense, obviously, there's tension. Lax, relax. Okay, so there are vowels that are tighter, right? They need tension to form them, and then there's ones that are more relaxed. Now, part of the reason why I don't like that concept, even though it is objectively accurate, is it's a little misleading. It can cause understanding problems. It can cause problems with you getting the right result. Um, and it can also cause problems with your posture, right? If you hear that E is a tense vowel and I is a lax vowel, well, then you might say, well, I have to be really tight on my E, and then you accidentally tighten your posture too much. And you might feel like, well, I have to be really relaxed in my I, and then like you just don't form the sound well enough. You end up more in an because is even more relaxed, right? It's all relative. Is the third most relaxed sound in the language. I would probably say off the top of my head, I haven't actually placed it. I just know the top 3. Might be like the 4th or 5th most relaxed sound. It is a pretty relaxed sound, yeah. Um, but there's a degree to this. It's not like, oh, and are both lax vowels, so therefore they're both equally relaxed. No, that's not how it works. Okay. Especially because they have different demands on the posture, whatever your posture happens to be. Um, so is going to pull on the posture more than because is a higher sound. You don't really have to, like, you can slightly lift the front if you want to, but you don't have to do any change between and eh. You can keep the jaw the same, you can keep the tongue the same. You just place the sound here, add a little bit of resistance here and there, done. Right? Super easy. There's a couple other caveats we can talk about there with the structure of it, but it's literally one of the single most relaxed sounds in the entire language, where it does need a little bit of structuring and lifting to it. So it's going to be compared to tighter. Doesn't mean it's a tense vowel. So you can see where, like, this concept, it's like, maybe there's more like a range of lax versus tense, which may also vary depending on the language, because, like, what are the different demands on the posture, right? I don't know how true that would be between languages, but anyway, the point is that E and I share a structure. And what do I mean by they share a structure? So E, as I said, it's a very high sound. It's a very tight sound. It's one of the tightest vowels in the language, relatively speaking. Now, remember, when we say tight, that's also relative. Tightness itself is relative. Relaxedness itself is relative. Because if I say, hey, relax, don't relax our structure too much. Relax your structure. Maybe you're just holding a little too much static tension. Maybe it's not your tension or our tension. You're just kind of squeezing a little too much. So then you got to relax that. Okay. Relax doesn't just mean relax. Same thing with tension. When we talk about tension or tightening, if I say E is a tight vowel or a tense vowel, that doesn't mean that you have to bring all this tension into your system and really, like, "Ah." Like, yeah, we see that, yeah, there's a lot of posture resistance, okay, relative to a lot of other sounds. Sure, there's going to be more tension in the posture to keep itself there because of the demands of the E, but that doesn't mean that you can over tighten the posture. If I get like if I get like really, really tight, I'm going to mess things up, right? So there's always a limit. Overall, we're very relaxed. Even our sounds are relatively relaxed, right? Our most tense sounds are still going to have sort of a touch of relaxedness because that's the quality of the American accent. It's a very relaxed, sort of laid back sounding accent. And then you throw in lazy versions of sounds where we don't always fully articulate that E or that ah, and we get E and ah even more. Okay. But the base underlying structure and posture resistances are still always going to be there. So because E is relatively super tight compared intense compared to the other vowels and needs to really lift itself up here, okay, doesn't have a lot of support from the area around it. So it's going to dig into that fourth tooth a bit. It's going to try to float. You're pushing into the sound here while you have this nice structure. The sides feel like they're a little bit more lifted than the body there, kind of like how we do in our center of gravity or our middle shape there. Just locally in this area, you sort of push down in there. Okay. And now you have a nice, good little structure, right? It's nice. It's like a little scaffolding that's allows the sound to sort of hold itself there, and you can place the sound without it falling through to the next one, right? Well, the I shares that structure. Now, I can do the I in a way that it doesn't share the structure, okay? I've mentioned this before. Some of what I tell you guys is based off of results I get and ways to make things easier, but not every little detail that I say is going to be a universal description of how natives speak or how every native speaks, right? There's always a little wiggle room, there's always little variations, different ways to do things. The posture, if you have a neutral American accent, the posture will always be either 100% identical or almost identical, okay? That doesn't really change much because that's the core of the accent. But some of these other details, like, do I have to use the E structure to make my I? Not necessarily. But teaching the it to people, this is one of the things that usually helps them. And then once you have a good handle over it, you have a good posture, you have a good it, you have control, you can maybe loosen things up a little bit like a native would and not really have to worry too much on leaning into that E structure when you're doing it. Okay. There's some training wheels here. Okay. Just keep that in mind because you might ask another native, hey, do you do this when you do your A? And they're like, no. And you might ask another native, and who knows, maybe they'll say, yeah. Okay. There is variation. even within a particular speaker, even within me. Okay. Not everything is always exactly the same, but things are generally stabilized within a little bit of wiggle room. Okay. For your you're going to keep that same scaffold. You're going to push into the fourth tooth a little bit. You're still going to keep sort of that tension of the E. You're still lifting up a little bit, just not as high. And again, we're not placing the sound as far forward. It's going to be a little bit farther back, a little bit lower. Don't lift as much. Okay. So you let it come down a little bit. And you're sort of just relaxing into that E structure, right? It's like E wants to really like hold itself up. And then the I sort of like just takes that structure and it sort of like relaxes a little bit. It's like it's still there, but it's just sort of like, I'm just going to kind of like hang out, right? So you don't need as much tension because it's not as high, it's not as tight, but it's still using that same structure or scaffold, if that makes sense. If that's confusing, then let me know. You don't have to think about it that way, but that usually helps people get the a lot more easily. Now we talked about the 11 and how if you try to get your 11 resistance, your I might fall through to an e. Similarly, if you don't have full control over the posture and or articulation of the sounds, whether or not your 11 is working correctly, dropping from the E to the I, you might accidentally go too far into the E. And that could be because you lose that structure a bit and or because you just accidentally go too far. You overshoot it because you're still not quite sure where the sound is, or you don't have it as muscle memory yet. And that's another common mistake. So there's multiple ways that you can end up in an E. It's not necessarily because of the 11 or whatever. But these are things to check. Okay. So use the structure of the E to help your I without letting it fall into E. Okay. That's all I have for I. Clean this up a little bit. All right. Now, before we go to let's go back to the comments. I am starting to run a little bit at a time. Keep that in mind. I have a class in like an hour and a half or so, and I don't want to rush off to that. So I'm going to try to finish this up within the next like 30 minutes or so. And in fact, I'm going to put a hard stop at 3:30. It's 2:57 here now. So we got 33 minutes. If you have any big important questions, feel free to leave them. But otherwise, I'm just going to try to catch up on the chat and finish what I'm talking about in the next half hour. In a relaxed position of American posture. So in the relaxed position of American posture, when you say the whole side of tongue is wide and lifted, that means we attach the whole side of the tongue along the side of the bottom teeth. I can see how maybe that description could be looked at in multiple ways, and I want to say yes, that does match. That does seem like an accurate description to me, but depending on how you're thinking about it, maybe not. Side of top teeth not included, or is it that very wide to touch the side of the bottom teeth to naturally get the width of the posture of our tongue? Okay, so we don't really care too much about the bottom teeth, but if you are doing your two correctly, like you have your one and then you have your two, you relax wide, you have your bottom teeth here, right? You have your top teeth here. This is not gonna, hold on. Let me do this better. Okay. Top tooth, bottom tooth, bottom tooth. Okay. Now we're just gonna say this is the fourth tooth. The bottom, it would apply just in general, doesn't matter. You can also touch the fifth and the sixth for your top connection, but the fourth is the one that needs to be lined up. That's the guidepost. If you also touch fifth and sixth, it doesn't matter. But anyway, okay. So the tongue shape needs to be something. I really did not draw this correctly. Hold on. I realize those are very uneven. That's not going to work very well. So my mouth is open a little bit. So maybe we get like here. Get that approximately the same height. Something kind of like that. Okay, that's better. So like, let's say your tongue is, your tongue is wide. So it's going to be something kind of like this. Maybe this terrible drawing. Okay, it's approximate. This is maybe even a little too much. I'd maybe close that up a little bit. I'm just trying to give you an approximation here. I'm not an artist. But your tongue will sort of be hanging from the top teeth. That's what you should feel. You have that shape, regardless of whether you're touching or not, but it'll feel sort of like you're hanging off. You can relax wide a little bit. So that 2 is going to go this way. Your 1 goes this way, right? So 1, 2, 2. And you will feel, sort of like the inside corners of those bottom teeth as if you're the under part of the middle tongue is sort of resting on them. Again, we're not focused on that necessarily, but if you don't feel those bottom teeth there, la 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 la, yeah. Yeah, I would say that I pretty much always feel them. So if you don't feel them, you're still probably too narrow. You might be pushing up a little bit. So I guess it is kind of a good reference point. You may not feel it in every single sound necessarily, but I do just sort of trying to pay attention to it right now. Like if I do like a l, which is the only sound we have that narrows the tongue, I don't feel it anymore. Or I don't really feel it as much in but that's because the 2 will flip upside down, where the 1 stays the same. So you get more of a shape sort of like that. So that makes sense that I wouldn't really be feeling that anymore. So the L and the R, the light L and the R, I don't really feel it, but I would say probably all the other sounds. It's a safe bet that you should be feeling the corners there. Don't be pushing into them. You should just happen to lightly feel them, their presence. Okay, it's just sort of a landmark. Like if you're touching it, you're probably doing the right thing. If you're not touching it, you're probably not doing the right thing. But don't try to push into it. That would cause problems. So hopefully that answers the question. Is American mouth posture the same as British mouth posture, or is it different? What are the differences? I don't know all the differences. A lot of the linguistic literature, I haven't looked at the literature in like a few years since I like discovered the concept and then verified my hypothesis and found that there is actually a little bit of literature on it. But in the literature, they seem to mostly focus on British English. And that kind of threw me off in the beginning a little bit. That's why I accidentally said the hinge was the 5th tooth when I first introduced the hinge concept in one of my videos, and later I corrected that to the 4th tooth. The British English and American English share a lot of the mouth posture. I think Australian also shares a lot of the mouth posture. But there are differences. Based off of what I've heard described, instead of being focused around the corners of the 4th tooth, they still have the hinge on the 4th tooth. It was a British linguist, I'm pretty sure she was British, who discovered the hinge to begin with. Like she's the one who called it the hinge and identified it as the 4th tooth. But instead of being around the corner, a lot of the description that I saw was that it's sort of up here, right? So it's actually like that's still the hinge and it's still a guidepost. It's the same thing. It's just instead of touching the corner, you sort of like, I guess, touch up inside the mouth here. And it does seem to me that maybe British people don't have that same depth of shape. I'm actually not sure if they have that shape at all. I'm sure they have some degree of that shape, but I think American English, because it's just so low and wide and relaxed, it sort of like collapses down and just that shape just naturally forms. Where British English does seem to have more tension. They definitely have more forward tension. They seem to be back like we are, because again, part of the literature said that like French posture touches the teeth here in most of the time, but they were saying English, which again, it was based off of British English, is pulled back from the teeth. And so if that's the case, I hear forward tension. You can even hear it in their schwa. If you listen closely, their schwa sounds a little bit like it's slightly slanted forward compared to ours. So they have forward tension, but their position is still back. And that's why I say it's important that position and directional tension are not the same. Okay. You don't want to confuse those two. They tend to work together in American English, right? And maybe the other way in some other languages. But in the case of British English compared to American English, there would be sort of a difference between those two going opposite directions. And their center of gravity isn't their center of gravity. Take this with a grain of salt. This is based off of my ears, the fact that I feel that their schwa is slanted forward, and what I heard from a British teacher who seemed to be stumbling upon the same thing that I might have been stumbling upon at the time. He said that the sort of center of gravity or core, like the thinking sound. I actually think I took the term thinking sound from this teacher. I'm not sure, but the thinking sound for us would be for British people it's more eh. Like they still have and and there's multiple thinking sounds, but it seems to be like they hold some tension here, and that's sort of slanting everything forward, even though their position is back. So again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, especially since I'm short on time here. We're not here for British English. Um, there are things that are shared for sure. I was gonna say for certain and for sure at the same time. For sure. But the resistances probably don't work the same way. The shaping probably isn't the same. The tension is at least a little bit different. They do seem to be kind of higher. Maybe they have somewhat like something of the same shape. They just hold it higher. I don't know all the details. I do know that if I try to tense forward, maybe get a little tiny bit going through my nose, get my global resonance more in the front rather than in the back, as it is in American English. And I try to speak more from the front of my mouth, as well as just trying to slightly modify the way I'm doing, some sounds to match the accent. That I find gives me a much quicker and easier entry point into sounding British than I had before, where I was just trying to mimic a British accent. Um, so yeah, there's going to be a lot of things that are shared for sure, but it's not the same. Sounds like the Russian E, like the quality change is crazy. Yeah. So back when I was talking about the different E's, exactly. Yeah. Remember, focus on quality here, not the sounds. The articulation is important, but it's all about that quality, and posture dictates most of the quality. Christy, what are the differences between mouth posture, mouth position, and pronunciation? Good. So somebody asked this question a little while ago. I don't know if it was you. If it was, I'm behind on comments. I want to answer them in the live streams, but again, I'm going to run out of time. I will answer this here really quick. So this is a common question. So pronunciation is overall pronunciation. Strictly speaking, we might think of it as like the sounds or whatever, but pronunciation is sort of a category. So you have pronunciation, and then within that you have like intonation and rhythm and stress. Sorry, this is very terribly written. Linking, sounds, the articulation of sounds, right? And then technically you would also have posture underneath that, because posture is also at play. So this has to pronunciation is like the thing. It's everything, right? Sometimes when people say pronunciation, they're referring specifically to the sounds, because that's what we most readily think of when we talk about pronouncing things. So sometimes if the context isn't clear, that might be a little confusing, but it's also used as the category word. So we talk about speaking skills, pronunciation skills, all these are under pronunciation skills. So that's more generic. Mouth posture. So a lot of people use terms like position. They'll talk about like voice placement or voice position. They'll talk about sound placement, sound position. These words placement and position, I tend to avoid them for the most part because they can be a little confusing. They can be a little misleading. Not necessarily that they're like wrong. They're perfectly accurate terms that can convey what they're trying to talk about. But particularly within working uh, while working within the reality and the context of mouth posture, these terms position and placement can become even more confusing. Like, wait, okay, so there's posture, but then what about like position or placement of this? Okay, whatever. So when we're talking about mouth position, usually based off of what I've seen people describing, that's going to be specific to a sound. So like the mouth position for the E would be like a high front tongue, right? That's where the E is in the mouth. That's the position of the E where it's located in the mouth. So if you look at like a vowel chart, you see, oh, okay, it's high front sound. Okay. So the term is accurate. Position. It's where it's located in the mouth. Okay. But then it's like mouth position. So it's like, wait, does that apply to the whole mouth or does that apply to a sound? Right. So we say the mouth position for E, the mouth position for I, where you could just say, well, the E position or the position of E, I think that's more accurate, because if you're talking about the sound, why bring in mouth when you could just say where the sound is in the mouth? Right. Again, not that it's wrong, it's just especially with the reality of mouth posture, it becomes muddy and a little confusing. Even without mouth posture, it can become a little confusing. So I don't use that. Same thing with placement, right? The placement of the E sound is high on the front of the tongue. Okay, right. That's an accurate statement. Um, but usually that's what people are talking about when they talk about position. It's where's the sound located inside the mouth? Is it back, middle, front? Is it high? Is it low? Is it mid? Okay, so you hear like high front rounded vowel or something. If you look up the technical description for I don't know what that would fit, but like something like that. I don't know. So it can be useful, especially if you're going between languages, but I sort of have my own little system that allows you to kind of avoid a lot of that. So if you're like, if you heard things elsewhere and then you come to me, it's fair to have those questions. That's fine. I can clarify all that. Mouth posture would be, how is the vocal tract held underneath the sounds, which then needs to stabilize and maintain itself as the sounds are being formed and trying to pull on it. Every language and even every dialect is going to have posture. Between dialects or even sometimes between languages, that posture might be very similar or even identical. Sometimes it's very, very different, like American English posture, very low, very open, very wide, back, throats open, okay? Where Spanish, Russian, especially language like Japanese, tends to be much higher, a lot more squeezed in the throat, squeezed in the tongue, everything's pushed forward, okay? Um, that has nothing to do with the particular sound you're articulating. That's going to be true regardless of the sound. And it creates sort of the base structure and parameters that you're then working with when you form those sounds. So E is a sound that pretty much every language has. It's going to be high front vowel. It's going to be somewhere up in here. Maybe sometimes it's on the front half. Maybe sometimes it's on the back half. I've even seen sometimes where it's more on the front of the middle. I can do it there too. We're not going to worry about all the variations, but generally E is described as a high front sound. Okay, great. That doesn't tell you anything about the quality. I can say E, 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 E. I can do all kinds of E's. Those are all E's, right? And you might, to some degree, linguists can go in and they can say, well, there's this little quality in this one. And so we put this special symbol in this and that. To my understanding, none of those symbols reflect posture. Um, and I don't even know if that would be very feasible or useful, but I'm not a fan of the IPA to begin with. But like I tried to demonstrate earlier between like trying to do like more of a Spanish E or an English E, even though E's are pretty universal and they sound the same, it's clearly the same sound, the quality is going to be different. Sometimes that quality difference can come from a slight difference in articulation, which I think the IPA probably does a good job in documenting if they have like a little symbol above it or below it or something like that. But it's otherwise the same symbol between languages. That's usually gonna be like an articulation difference, I think. So the posture is like, what is the basic arrangement of the vocal tract uh, that the sounds then play within, right? So like that second floor of the house I was talking about earlier. Whoops, I think I just launched Marvel Rivals. um, this floor here, right? This is where all the sounds play. This is where all the sounds live. Yeah, I did. Sorry, that's gonna pop up. Um, And so the posture, it doesn't matter. Like my 1, 2, and 5 are still here. That's up here. That still needs to keep itself. And that's going to be most directly involved with resisting against the sounds themselves. But my 3 and my 11 still need to maintain themselves. They need to start in a particular position based off of the thinking sound, which is and then it needs to maintain itself roughly based on how the other sounds are trying to pull on it. So my 11 and my 3 starts lower, 11's farther back. I'm not pinching anything. Okay. And then all the sounds operate from that starting point. Okay. And any of the sounds that try to pull against that to go the other way, the posture is going to try to resist and keep itself in place. Where your posture, maybe instead of starting here, you start here. You're higher, you're tighter, you know, you're more tense. And then that's just how you speak the language. The sounds play with that instead. And then you're maybe going to resist in a different way, depending on the demand, like how your particular language or posture needs to resist. Um, so yeah, it's that basic structure. It doesn't have anything to do with the sounds themselves. It's under the sounds. Uh, I am so behind, guys. Oh my god. Okay, I'm gonna do a speed run. Yeah, I'm gonna run out of time. Okay. Nothing. Stop doesn't affect anything in the posture. Yeah. Uh, okay. Maybe the six does some resistance. That's something maybe I need to look at a little bit more. But I don't really feel anything change. Like if I just do a glottal stop, it feels almost identical to an um, well, the root of the tongue needs to be stable, and that stabilization is going to come against whatever the sound is doing. That's not necessarily because of the glottal stop. So if you're doing the glottal stop, it's like okay, if I say I don't know, he see, because I can still hold that E position and E resistance and then just close off the glottis. So that seems to be somewhat independent. If you're doing an maybe I might get a little bit of six, but it does seem to be not a particular thing. Like it just sort of gets added on top of whatever you're doing, or it can. Um, Good morning, even though it's 12:30. Do you have an updated lesson or tips or techniques that you discovered recently when pronouncing these diphthongs? I probably do have some updates. I don't have time to go into that today. I can maybe save that for next time. So for now, no. And why did you not include the O in your transcription method? Maybe diphthong. So like the O sound, that's because the way that I teach the O is it's more of a semi-diphthong, even sort of a monophthong. The way that it's traditionally taught is you have that sort of backwards C sound like aw, and then that moves into the sound while the lips come around. So you get like oh or something like that. That's the way that it's taught by most teachers still. You don't have to do it that way. The easier way to do it, and you'll actually commonly hear Americans do this, you'll actually hear a little bit of an before a lot of Americans say the O sound, and you'll hear something like oh, oh. Okay. So it's not a full separate sound, but we're sort of starting kind of in the schwa, and then we're just kind of coming up and back onto the back of the tongue. And the O sound itself, I'm placing it here as an individual sound placement, not a diphthong that's where the sound is formed between two sounds blending. So I actually use it technically as like a monophthong, or we can say sort of a semi-diphthong. And by the way, the oo can work the same way, but it doesn't have to. That would be between sort of like the high schwa, and the oo position. That's how we can, if we don't move the lips, that's how we can sort of still get that rounding movement sound in the oo. But that's a little more advanced, so you don't have to care. So in my transcription, O is just transcribed O, because that's what it is. E is E, O is O. Like, okay, who cares if it's a semi-diphthong or whatever? It's a sound. It's an individual sound essentially, and it's so much easier to do that way. Which comes first, speaking fluently or speaking with correct pronunciation? Much better. Speaking fluently. Ideally, you'll build the the posture and pronunciation as you go. Like you can't just like magically have perfect pronunciation when you start speaking, obviously, right? But yeah, I'm losing my voice now. That's great. The way that I know people are afraid of bad habits and stuff, and there are things that you can do to create bad habits, but generally speaking, the way that development of speaking skills goes, and I would, if you want good pronunciation, you would weave the pronunciation into this like directly and indirectly on the side. They're two different things. Pronunciation doesn't just improve unless like you focus on it. So you can weave that in along the way. But any good teacher, the lower level you are, the fewer corrections you'll get. And this is because it's very discouraging. You're going to be making a lot of mistakes anyway. You just have to get those mistakes out and practice the mechanical act of like putting your thoughts into English and stringing words together and being understood. They'll give you corrections on big things that are confusing. They're going to focus on like how well are you communicating. If I'm confused, or you made like a really big mistake that might be confusing, then I would correct you. Say if you're like a beginner, if you're like A1, A2 in the European framework. But the higher you get, the more you have that ability to flow a little bit more effortlessly, even though you might, you'll pause less frequently, et cetera, et cetera. And the big mistakes will no longer be there as much. There's always going to be a little lag and whatever, but you'll make fewer big mistakes. You'll make more medium and small mistakes, right? And then as you go up to that medium level, now it's easier because you can speak more easily without worrying about being interrupted every 2 seconds because you made a mistake. Now a good teacher would try to correct still any big mistakes you make, but then also more of those medium level mistakes. That's not just about being clear, but also about being a little bit more accurate, a little bit maybe more subtle and nuanced in your expression. And then when you get up to sort of that advanced level, or like upper intermediate to advanced, where you have basic conversational fluency, you don't really have to think much, you can understand things, but you still have some grammar mistakes, you still have some vocabulary mistakes, et cetera, then they would focus on trying to catch, the higher you go, the more specific the little mistake catching gets. So that's the best way. Um, Generally, I would recommend to go about, sort of teaching or learning. Um, because the other way, and being afraid of like making bad habits, it's generally a lot of fear for no reason, unless you really mess things up. But if you're working with a teacher and getting feedback, you don't generally have to worry too much about that. So mostly if you're just like practicing by yourself and speaking to yourself because you don't have a teacher or someone to talk to, that's when you run into the problem of building bad habits. It's still a great tool. Speaking to yourself is really great for improving your fluency. It's not really great for improving your accuracy necessarily. That's where the bad habits can come in. So on the side, yes, but you should at least have some speaker, even if it's, like somebody who's going to give you some sort of correction, ideally, uh, sort of guide you along the way, I guess. Again, pronunciation can get weaved in on that. She just answered your question. Ideally, you should learn how to sound correct. Maybe problematic. Yeah. So, well, that's if we're talking about pronunciation specifically, right? And it's not that you try to sound correct from day one. It's like, oh, I learned the word dog today, and I can't say so failure. No, it's an ongoing sort of spiral thing mixed with everything else. Like it's all up in my genius language brain. Like it makes sense. And if I ever get around to building that comprehensive product, you guys will see how that would work. But um, you should ideally have a pronunciation first emphasis, um, not with a compulsion on making everything perfect out of the gate, but with an eye to building the correct habits, building the correct posture, learning how to do the sounds correctly as you learn the language and as you learn words. Um, so you don't want to get caught in like sounding perfect from day one, but you do want to have an eye on building that pronunciation starting from day one, to sort of clarify, because how this is worded, whether you intended it or not, it doesn't matter, but that could be read a couple different ways. So I want to clarify that. How do you pronounce the R sound in car, red, and rare, and pronounce all of them by mouth posture? Don't have time to go into the mouth posture for that, unfortunately. I talked about that, I think, in the last live stream, if not the one before that. I went into sort of the R uh, updates into the posture details and whatever I mentioned earlier, like the two flips where the one stays down. Um, the in all of these is exactly the same. The only difference between R's is that one, is a consonant, which everybody will agree with. And you say If you want to do as a vowel, like you say earth or her or whatever, you do exactly the same thing. You just make it longer because vowels need more length. If you try to mix those up and you say run, that sounds weird. If you try to say her, that sounds weird. So vowels need more space. That's the only difference. Articulation is exactly the same. When you have a case like car or rare, where you're getting these R colored vowels or potentially R colored vowels, the itself is the same, but it can become sort of a center of gravity underneath the vowel that's before it and give it a coloring. So now sounds more like or something like that. But the R itself is always going to be pronounced the same. And there's a little wiggle room in how to do the R. I give you sort of just like a straight, simple version, because it tends to be the way that helps most people. But uh, I don't do the R any differently depending on what word it is or what combination it's in. It's always the same. My very last question about resonance saying, since local resonance is the main pressure and is under every sound. Okay. Global resonance is the main pressure, not local resonance. Local is where the sound is. Global is constant. That'd be in the back. If you convert them into percentage, well, yeah, I think I saw you leave a comment about this. I don't think that's the way. That's not the way to think about it. The global is always going to be firing away at full speed, right? That's one reason why you have to keep things low for the most part. I mean, again, there's wiggle room. Yeah, okay, whatever. But then usually, like the more that the back comes up, like say if you're doing like an U or a W, you're gonna like the space here wants to be maintained. So you might even have to like widen your 8 a little bit. But the global resonance is always more or less firing at full speed, no matter what sound you're doing. If I'm doing an if I'm doing an if I'm doing an e, okay. Um, and then the local resonance gets put on top of that. So like the e would be up through here. So you'd feel some resonance here. You'd hear, some brightness up here. E. If I don't do that, and I just say e. Now it sounds like there's no resonance up here, even though I'm doing e, right? So resonance can also have an effect on the quality, unfortunately. Posture and resonance are sort of indirectly linked. It's sort of a side note in the process of things. Usually, if you get the posture right, the resonance kind of takes care of itself. But sometimes we have to talk about it directly. So I wouldn't think of it in percentages. It's more just like this. This generally should be more or less 100% at all times, and then whatever other sound you're doing, like if the sound is back here, it's just there, right? It doesn't change. But if you're doing like an E up here, then you would be doing like 100% local resonance up here while doing 100% global resonance back here. Like they just happen at the same time. And maybe I need a more subtle, nuanced understanding of that, but that would be my current analysis and understanding. I don't try to like cut this in half and add it up here or anything like that. Like, no. What's the difference between 5 and 11? I've talked about that before. I don't have time right now. But 5 is basically the top of the back of the tongue plus center of gravity. 11 is the root of the tongue. Different parts. We would love it if you could do live streams more regularly, such as every week, 3 to 4 days, or every 3 to 4 days. Yeah, I know. I'm maybe yes, no. I don't know. It depends. I was inspired today and decided to kind of just do an impromptu one. I know you guys, want more content and updates from me. Various reasons why it might take more or less time for me to do another live stream. So it is what it is. I could try to make it a little more frequent, but between like work and sometimes I just really am like, bleh, I'm out of it. Right now I'm experimenting with a particular ADHD medication and sort of trying to like see how that affects me. And so I'm sort of like ups and downs, right now. And so there's that in the mix. And yeah, and then I have like the other channel I'm trying to make as well. So I know I'm trying to give you guys something, right? Like, do you normally speak at a natural American speed, like in daily conversations, or do you slow down when teaching and during live streams? So with you guys, like on the channel, especially in the live streams, I more or less, I know I subconsciously probably slow down and articulate a little bit. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'll like, whatever. But I am subconsciously aware of my audience. I don't. Well, how I'm speaking to you now is not super different than how I would normally speak. Because I know a lot of the people watching, for better or worse, already understand what I say anyway, even if I, don't articulate. So like in the videos, a lot of my videos, I tried to kind of slow it down more and articulate a little bit more because I wanted to be as accessible to like the lowest level possible. But when I'm actually talking directly to people, that's why I say if you're going to work with me directly, like bare minimum, you need lower intermediate, preferably upper intermediate. So yeah, I'm talking pretty normally right now. In natural, no A, in natural fast speech, like when you're talking, that's typo, talking to us right now, do you feel any little tension in your jaw hinge, or is it completely relaxed? So the jaw hinge, so specifically like this. So the jaw needs to sort of stabilize itself, right? Because there's a certain openness to it, and I actually don't have to really move it a lot around very much. The lips moving around will give the illusion that the jaw's moving more than it needs to be. I'm doing ahs and ahs and all kinds of things, and my jaw doesn't really have to move that much from that base 50% position. So there's going to be a little stabilizing tension, but as I'm talking to you right now, maybe just because I'm a native speaker and I'm used to talking, I don't particularly feel any tension. There's probably a little bit in there that is just really subtle. Usually the problem is you have too much tension when you're speaking English. In fact, your posture could be perfect, your articulation could be perfect. And usually what I find, or maybe near perfect, usually what I find is like the tongue and the jaw in a lot of languages, they tend to be more like tied together because your posture wants to like help the sounds go that way. And so, uh, especially for my more advanced students that like they're getting the posture really well, they're getting the articulation, they'll just sound kind of tight, like they're holding their jaw like this a little bit, and they'll bring tension into their system. So they sound American, but they just sound really tight or angry. Okay. Usually you want to loosen up that jaw, loosen up the tongue a little bit more. Yeah. When speaking to all Americans, use both sides of the tongue, touching the number fourth teeth, or only some Americans do. I can't speak for all Americans, but the theory, at least, is that posture would be universal, or roughly universal. There's always going to be a little bit of wiggle room. So it would be equal. It'd be on both sides of the tongue. I have had some students where they have a little bit of an imbalance where, like, for whatever reason, like a, you know, speech impediment or just some sort of weird muscular development that they went through, where like maybe like this side is just naturally stronger or whatever. And usually you'll get this sound almost like if you try to go for a T, you'll sound like you're kind of going through the sides a little bit, almost like you're speaking into your cheeks. Um, but most people don't have that. And so it should always be even. I keep that shape. I don't do this and this. Like it's always the same shape, right? Um, and again, it's not always touching. I explained that earlier. The shape is important, but most sounds you will be touching the fourth tooth on the corner. It's part of the American accent. So yeah, all Americans would do that. Game break. It's hard to break if you're speaking from the chest. That is very true. Yeah, don't speak from the chest. Don't speak from the chest. That's what I told you guys before. You should feel vibration, secondary vibration in your chest, not primary. It's going to sort of radiate down this way. If you're breathing correctly and your thing is open and set up right, you'll feel vibration here. You'll even feel vibration up towards your head a little bit. That's normal. Don't speak from the chest. Don't breathe in the chest. Use your diaphragm. That's another thing. People get tight in their chest as they're trying to breathe in and out. That causes tightness in your valve, right? So if your valve's tight, maybe it's because your chest is tight. Okay, maybe you're not using your diaphragm correctly. That's why in that new house framework image, I say valve plus breath. We don't want to forget the breath. That has a direct impact on what your valve is doing. Okay. When pronouncing blah, 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 does your tongue touch the upper front teeth or not? No. L can. The other one, it doesn't have to. The other ones, no. We touch the bump right here. You never, ever, ever touch the teeth with those sounds. Never. That's not English. If you do a dental T or D as a replacement for the TH sounds, yes, you can touch, but regular TD, N, Z, and S, never ever. You're not even going to be close to the front of the teeth. You're going to take the front half of the blade, not the tip, not the back half of the blade, the front half of the blade right there, this section right here. Yes, it's very specific because most languages are pushed forward, and so the back half of the blade is lined up under the bump instead, and a lot of languages will touch the teeth or get closer to the teeth. You want to be using the front half of the blade, I talked about this in recent live streams, to touch that bump or be right under that bump in S and Z. That's how you do the sounds in American English. If you feel like you have to go backward in order to do that, your posture is pushed forward. You need to fix that. Thank you so much. You're welcome. What is the shape of the tongue and where is the tongue tip when we make American? I don't have time to go into that, unfortunately. You could check previous, like the last 1 or 2 live streams. Is the tongue curled up or down when you do R? The sides, that shape, the sides will curl up this way. They'll sort of invert. So now you're like that, but the one is still pushing down. So it's not necessarily that it curls. And again, there's variation to that. But the back of the tongue will get out of the way, sort of like shrinks itself out so that you can maintain space since there's less space up here in the middle. Front of the tongue just gets pulled. You don't have to do the retroflex. You don't have to, the front of the tongue doesn't matter as long as you don't tap and it doesn't get in the way. The front of the tongue is not part of the R. Okay. You don't need it to form the R. Just let it be pulled into the middle. It's fine. Yeah, that's what I'd say about that. Now I am out of time, but for the sake of completion, I will quickly, I do have lots of videos about the R. Do you need to look at IPA before? No. In fact, you shouldn't look at the IPA. I hate the IPA. I strongly do not recommend. I strongly recommend that you don't use the IPA for various reasons. It's a tool. If it helps, great. I don't care. Whatever helps you, it doesn't matter what I like. Me personally, no. I don't like it. I think it's confusing. I think it's misleading. Yes, it's imperfect. I know it's naturally imperfect. No tool is perfect. If you are the only really good use, in my opinion, for IPA is for linguists, and for if you're starting to learn a new language and you want to see if you have shared approximate sounds and where those sounds might be. But again, many sounds have E, many sounds have I'm trying to think of ooh, many sounds have like, some shared things with English. And many languages have shared sounds with English. E is the easiest, best example, and the quality is not the same. So the IPA, if you go to the IPA for the E sound, you're going to see this. You're going to see that in American English, Spanish, Russian, Japanese, pretty much any language you look at, you're going to see that symbol. Maybe sometimes there's a little thing under it, or there's a little two dots above it, or whatever. That sometimes happens, but regardless of whether there's an extra symbol there or not, the quality will not be the same because of the posture. Okay. So yeah, posture massively trumps the IPA details. Again, use it as a tool if it helps you. I don't have statistics on that yet. People are still working their way through. Does depend on the person. Yes, there's a lot of factors into that. If you have natural talent or not, you're probably average. Sometimes people take longer for certain things than other things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes things click more easily with people than others. It also depends on like how many bad habits do you have, how close is your accent already, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So but I would plan, if you were looking into it, I would plan, my goal is to take the average person from thick accent to sounding at least native like or near native in 3 months. That's my goal. I don't know if that'll ever be possible, but that's the goal. That's what the version of the course I'm trying to build. Um, with how things are now, based off of the data I have from people who have gone, or who are working through the course and stuff, and people who are farther along or who have more or less finished, and people who haven't, who have just started, um, I would expect bare minimum 6 months. That currently, I'm always trying to improve that, but I can't make any solid promises of like, oh yeah, 6 months, and you'll sound like a native. But I can guarantee that even if it's only 3 months, you will make improvement, and within 6 months, you should most likely, unless you're sort of below average in your natural language ability, um, you will notice significant improvement within 6 months. Maybe even starting to sound native like. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. IFAT's the goat. Okay. Anyway, let me finish this up really quick. Okay. So no more comments. I'm done. Whatever. I'm gonna finish this up just so it's all in one place. Sorry. I know. Maybe I'll cut it out and make it a video. Probably not, but the thought is there. Okay. So your E is sort of roughly around in here. Okay. So that's your E. Now, what is the posture for the E? Well, you go to your valve again. Should be the same as maybe feel a little stabilizing structure or whatever, but not really any resistance. Okay, great. So same as so we say eh, great. Okay, then we go to the 3. Okay, now when we do the 3, what should the 3 do? Doesn't push down. Okay, definitely does not push down. It's not needed because isn't lifting itself up. Again, you can slightly lift the front of the tongue from its relaxed up position. You don't have to. And that little bit lifting, it doesn't require stabilization from the 3 to help lift itself up. It's just right there. Okay. So, however, what I did discover recently working with a student, I think I talked about this last time, is if you just give a little bit of static tension through here. Okay. Don't pinch it. Don't push it up or down or anything. Just sort of squeeze a little bit where it is. So you're already in place for you're locked in, and you just sort of squeeze a little bit. That's it. Just squeeze a little bit. Again, don't pinch it this way. It's easy to mix those up. Just a little static tension, as I would say, not directional tension, static tension. That can help to firm up and solidify that especially if you're trying to push it in this way, like I recommend that you do. And it can help sort of deepen the quality of that sound. So sometimes that helps, sometimes it doesn't. Usually more often than not, they may not solve the problem, but if everything else is working and you still don't sound right and you add that, usually that's the last missing piece based off of the people I've tried that with recently. Okay. 11. What does your 11 do? Not much. There's 11. I do feel a little bit of resistance. I could describe it as down and back. That's fine. That's how I've always described it. But it kind of actually feels like it's just sort of, again, a little bit of static tension. You can push it slightly down and back. It's nowhere near the eh. It's not going to feel very distinct from like eh, eh. Like I feel I can kind of come down and back a little bit, but I mostly just feel it sort of like statically squeezing a little bit. Again, no narrow, very important. Okay, but just sort of a little tension. Okay, sort of tightens up a little bit. Okay, great. So you have a little bit of that in your 3, a little bit of that in your 11. Uh, eh, uh, great. Okay. Um, for insurance, if you want to push down and back, you probably can, and that's fine. On the 5, okay. Again, we just need a little bit of resistance. Is the third most relaxed sound in the language. Doesn't need a lot. You're gonna feel just a little bit, just a little kind of little tension, little resistance. Okay. It is directional, not quite static, but very little. Very, very little. So uh 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 so basically the whole back of the tongue from the 5 through the 11, you're just gonna kind of like get some tension. The 5 is a little directional, but you're gonna feel a little bit of tension come through that back tongue as you do It's great. No big deal. Okay. It doesn't need much because it's not pulling on the posture much, right? The placement of the sound, like where it is, right? The position of it, like I was talking about earlier. And the the fact that it doesn't need a lot of tension in itself to form means that it doesn't have a lot of posture demand, right? So posture doesn't have to resist much. Okay, makes sense. Um, okay, then your 1 and your 2, again, you don't really have to do anything. Um, I can keep my 1 and my 2 exactly the same. I don't have to change anything. Okay. That being said, there's a structure that and a use that is different than e and I, and it's actually potentially different than any other sound. Okay. So and a are the only two sounds in the language that can do this. You can further, instead of just being like here, right around the corners with your tongue, okay, you can actually not from here, you're not widening from the middle, okay? Because you don't wanna flatten too much. You can get, like, slightly flatter, a little tiny bit, but you if you do what I'm gonna tell you, you will have to resist a little bit, um, but you don't wanna flatten it. You can optionally, you don't have to, but sometimes it helps people widen the tongue, just not from the middle, okay? You can take the sides here, the ends of your 2, and you can sorta stretch them to be about halfway or so through the teeth. You can't go out here, that's a little too much. And that can give you a little bit of a broader tongue, which can make the and the a little bit easier to do. Again, I don't have to do that. It's not required, but some people find it easier. If you do that and you feel like you need to sort of shift a little bit of your tension elsewhere, that's fine, but it will mostly just affect the 1 and the 2. Just make sure you're not pushing from the middle. This stays the same. You sort of stretch out on the sides there. Um, and then don't let it flatten out your shape in the middle. So that's a little variation detail, optional, gives you some wiggle room, some things that you can do. Okay. Um, definitely way over time. Okay. Is going to be, again, this is not perfect, but it's going to be, again, a little bit farther down and back. I'm putting it below the line because the jaw is probably going to open at least a little bit. But that's going to be sort of right on that line almost. Like it's wanting to go onto the middle part of the tongue, but it's still in the front part of the tongue. And this is one that you can most easily see. I've talked about this before. I'm not going to go into a bunch of details. But the image that you want to think of is like, say you have, Superman here. Okay. Nice little Superman with a little curly Q hair there that you can't see because he's so small. Okay. So he has Superman there and, he has a cape. Okay. And then there's a semi truck, right? I'm such an artist. I know it's beautiful. This is a really small semi truck or a really big Superman. Either way, you get the point. There's a semi truck coming, right? And he's barreling his way straight to Superman. Superman holds his hand out, right? And what's going to happen? Semi truck's going to hit Superman. Superman's not going to move, right? This is your ah. Your wants to make especially the back of your tongue and the middle of your tongue, but the entire posture, even all the way down to here, it wants to make it go like that. Okay. It's one of the tightest sounds in the language. You actually, once you get control over it, you don't need a whole lot of tension to make it, especially if you're doing the lazy version. But when you're first learning how to do it, and you can over tense it, especially if you're squeezing back here or something. It's a very delicate balance for some people to find, but compared to other sounds, it is one of the tighter sounds for sure. It's one of the tightest sounds, and so because it has such a strong force, it wants to sort of dig into the rest of the tongue and pull everything around this way. You don't want that to happen. So the image I like to use here is you imagine Supergirl. All right, I'm making her smaller because she's in the distance. Okay, she's gonna come and that's a big escape. She has nice little hair there. Okay, so good. Anyway, I'm such a great artist. She sees what's gonna happen. She's like, "Oh no," and she tries to save the truck, but of course she doesn't get there in time. And what happens instead is instead of saving the truck, she manages to just kind of hold it down. Right? Okay, so this is your posture resistance, especially in the 1, 2, and 5. This is of all sounds in the entire language, 1, 2, and 5 will need the most resistance in ah. Your 3 and your 11, almost nothing. There's no lifting here. In fact, we're the opposite. We're pushing down low. You can get a little tension here, like in your ed, that's fine. The 11, to me, it actually feels like I get a little bit of a curl, like it's curling in on itself. It's like it's just doing that, like the "ah" wants to pull it this way, so it just sort of curls back in on itself a little bit. It's a weird sensation. "Ah" is the only sound that I feel doing that. If that's confusing, just sort of give it a little static tension, maybe down and back. It should work out just fine, but, um, so the 11 might be a slightly weird, but it's not much. It's just a little bit. It's very minor. Like the "eh," very minor, even maybe less than the "eh." It's almost all up here for your resistance. Okay, so your Supergirl is going to be your 1, 2, and your 5. Okay. Again, 11 stabilizes this, so that doesn't get pulled up. Okay. And that makes sure that when you do hit Superman, bam, everything stays in place. Now, there's a thing called raising, which is not a postural change, it's an articulation variation. It doesn't really mess up the sound as long as your posture stays the same, where the back of the tongue can come higher. I've talked about that in other videos related to A before, including, I think, either the main A lesson or I think it was the one where I talked about A before N and M and why that can sound a little different. I don't recommend you do that. If the back of your tongue comes up a little bit, but your posture is still stable and you sound good, great. You can use that raising. I recommend you try not to use that wiggle room. Keep it low, okay? But you do have some wiggle room there. So, Superman, 1, 2, 5, Supergirl. This is your posture, okay? Your vocal tract, I guess, and you just bam, keep it in place, okay? That's the Now again, the can use that same structure as a. It doesn't have to widen, but if you do widen it, it's going to widen in the same way. In this case, of course, we're not actually touching the fourth tooth, but that length can sort of extend out a little bit as if it were halfway between the teeth. Um, yeah, that's about it. Okay. um, Now, last note here between and if you accidentally use more of the structure when you're doing an even if your is in the right place, you might sound like you're halfway to an Okay, that can cause a little interference, and vice versa. If you have a little bit of that E structure tension and you're trying to do an it might kind of pull it up a little bit or tighten it up and make it sound a little bit like an Those are possible sources of interference at the sort of sound structure or articulation level. And it's very common to have problem between these two sounds and getting them clear. Also between these two and between these two, right? This whole thing can be a mess. Some people have one of those problems. Some people have all four of those problems. Um, but between the posture and the different structures that you can use, and then knowing approximately where they are in relation to each other, you should be able to sort those details out, pull them apart, solidify them. Okay. So that concludes the live stream. Yay, we made it to the end. Okay. Um, I was wondering if your mouth posture course is structured into specific lessons and chapters from start to finish. Okay. I will finish on that note really quick, because that's a good final thing to wrap up the stream with. Where am I going here? Um, okay, so there's going to be like certain exercises and stuff. Like we work with a special paragraph when we do this whisper exercise and blah blah blah. And I'm not going to lay out every like little activity. Again, yeah, there's still lots of notes there that I've never updated, but right, we go through phase one. I've talked about this before, right? Phase one, current version, we do maybe we talk a little bit about H, all about getting the base posture, learning those numbers and those key pieces just in their basic form with no resistance. Doesn't really need to resist much of anything, maybe a little 5. I can get a little in my 11. It's basically the same as a. Okay, so that's fine. And then we go back and forth between and to make sure that we can get in and out of 2 sounds without ruining the posture. So that's our sort of first steps. Then we go and we start learning this sound set. Ta da na ka ga nga. We start combining it with us. We say ta da na. We do transitions, slow both directions. Ta etc. Trying to control the posture while getting in and out of those sounds. We also learn, what is the posture resistance for, these sounds as we go. These are all in a particular order for a particular reason. Once we have those and you can complete your first sound set or word set challenge, we start adding these sounds and we start getting into our first group of sentences. Okay. So it starts getting a little more complicated. And then group C, we add the A and the I. So it's basically the same thing, but we add A and I to get those 2 diphthongs near the front. And so we work through that, stabilizing the posture, articulating, getting lots of practice, blah, 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 blah. By the way, I've reworked the paragraph into the whole course in a different structured way, which I'm not going to go into that, but that would be running in parallel to all of this, helping to work on the posture from a different angle. Special paragraph has every sound multiple times except for R and L. Section 2, it's rinse and repeat a lot of the same things. So now we have a bunch of new sounds, which fall into a bunch of new sentences. That's group A. We work through those sentences. And then once you pass those sentences, we go to the next group of sounds. And then we do these sentences. And once you pass those sentences, then we go to the last group of sounds. And then we do our last group of sentences. Once you're here, you have every single sound in the language except for and ul, well, the 2 L's, dark and light, and the sound, which includes our colored vowels and all that stuff, which would be section 3, which we would then go into after that. If you feel like you're ready, because sometimes people want to give a little extra time here. By the time you get here, this doesn't mean that you've mastered all of these sounds. Like usually the as in book is still kind of, not working very well. Maybe even your is a little sticky, still trying to fine tune that. That can happen. We continue to kind of like work on those on the side as we, come up into like R's and L's and stuff. And there's always going to be some things that sort of lag a little bit for certain individuals. And that's fine. It all comes out in the end. You have certain grading criteria. So like if I feel like if you're only doing, 70, 80% on a sentence, I'm like, we need that to be a bit better before we can like move on. And I usually have you do like 2 sentences at a time usually. But if you get like say 90, 95% on a sentence, you're sounding pretty clear, you're sounding pretty good, natural, maybe native like, maybe not quite native like, but you're sounding pretty natural overall. Then we say, okay, that's a pass. We can, add a new sentence. So it's not about perfection. It's about constantly deepening and improving the things that we're doing as we go instead of getting caught on any one thing. And it sort of snowballs as we go. The last thing I'll mention is like for the sentences, speed is also a factor. So every new sentence, you start at 0.5. Every sentence is recorded, which by the way, you have reference recordings here, which you'll be using all the time in the course. We go to section 1. Here's all your sounds, blah, blah, blah. There's scales also. You're going to be doing vowel scales. It's all part of the practice. Standard sentences, A, B. So you have a 0.5. So like our first sentence, he needs to get on it. This is recorded by me, not slowed down by machine so that it doesn't sound all choppy, keeping roughly the same rhythm, the same stress, the same linking approximately. It's kind of hard to do that when we slow it down, but I'm just sort of stretching it out and slowing things down so that you have more time to still match everything. And we do, as I said, it's not a main focus, but we do, once we hit the sentences, we start adding a little bit of transcription, a little bit of stress, a little bit of linking, and that becomes more of a focus as you get a little bit of a better handle on the lower things. So everything's included except advanced intonation. We cover basic intonation and that's it. But the focus is always the posture. and the sound articulation. That's always the main focus. But you have 0.5, so you have time to kind of go through. You have a reference for that. And then if you pass the zero point 0.5 speed, then I say, okay, I want you to speed this sentence up, right? And then so you find this one, you say, okay, he needs to get on it. Now it's at 1x, which is not super slow, not super fast. It's more or less like it's still kind of articulated a little bit. I tried to, make it sound pretty normal for the most part. It's just might be slightly articulated. It's good normal speech, right? Not too fast, not too slow. You'd sound perfectly normal if you spoke, these sentences in this way in a normal conversation. Um, and you basically do the same thing, right? Now you might not be able to get up to 1x. You might have to like go to like point 0.8. Maybe that's the best you can do. And then from there, you continue to try to improve it. Once you can hit 1x at about 90 to 95% sounding natural, then we say, okay, the sentence is done. Throw it to the side. Next, right? And again, you're usually working on one or two, like two sentences at the same time, sometimes three, depending. Um, so you're always sort of cycling through these sentences as you get better at them through their speeds and stuff. So yeah, very in depth, very thorough, different angles, different techniques. There's the breakdown technique that we use to help you, like, if say you're trying to say his and it's not working, how do you fix that? Okay, you learn all that stuff in the course. After I finish your full program, would it be possible to continue studying with you? Well, I mean, the only thing I teach right now is this course. So no. If I taught other things, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't care, but this is literally all I teach. Not just pronunciation, but like mouth posture course. Like I've spent like what 5 years now, 4 or 5 years developing this, and I have no interest really. Like okay, vague interest, kind of sort of, because I want to revolutionize things. That's that's how my brain works. That's my blueprint course that I have on the back burner forever. But no, I really don't really have any particular desire to teach grammar or speaking skills or things like I have a consultation offering. If you go to my page and whatever, and you'll see that there's the mouth posture course and a consultation. Consultations are more, it's a little cheaper, but it's more for people who are like, hey, how can I improve my listening? How can I improve my speaking? Give me advice, give me guidance, give me some sort of structure, blah, 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 blah. It's not specific to pronunciation necessarily. And you can also maybe use that if you just have some sort of general pronunciation questions that you want answered, but it's not like a course or anything. So that would be the only other option. Those aren't regular lessons. They're just literally just like get some guidance, structure, and some questions answered rather than learning things or whatever. It's more like to help you help yourself, I guess. And then also to maybe talk more about the pronunciation course if you weren't sure, and we can maybe do like a little test into it to see if it might be a good fit. But anyway, yeah, I'm way over time. The things I do for you guys, I swear to God, I have like 20 minutes now, not even 20 minutes till my class. I have to go to the bathroom and get water and rest my voice. So I'm sorry that the thing I came to teach was scattered and sporadic like it usually is. If I feel moved, if I feel the spirit move me, I might go and cut those down into a more concise video so you have that all in one place. But here we are. Maybe somebody can leave timestamps in the description if you're ambitious. Sorry, I'm just doing the best I can here. All right, just trying to help you guys out. I'm not too good on the actual channel aspects these days, but okay. Yes, thank you guys. I will see you next time. And whenever that'll be, maybe it'll be impromptu tomorrow. Don't count on it, but I appreciate it. Thank you. And look forward to my new channel, because I'm pretty sure I'll end up posting my first batch of videos there before I go live, but we'll see which happens first. Okay. Bye. In stream.